Good evening. This is a call to order. Special meeting of the Governing Board of Education is called to order by Dr. Joseph Komorowski at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14, 2023 at the District Office, Conference Center, rooms A through C. Happy Valentine's Day. B, approval of the agenda. Are there any requests for changes to the agenda? I'll take a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented. Moved by Mr. Schwartz, seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion adopted 5-0. Open session. We have attendance, Governing Board, Dr. Joseph Komorowski, President, Mrs. Jennifer Wiersma-Clerk, Mrs. Allison Barclay, Mr. Danny Gonzalez, and Mr. Stephen Schwartz. Secretary of the Board, Dr. Jody McClay, Superintendent, Mrs. Nicole Lash, Assistant Superintendent, Business Support Services, Ms. Kimberly Velez, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Support Services, Mr. Frank Arce, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources Development, Ms. Nicole Deas, Assistant Superintendent, Student Support Services, Mrs. Lene Anakabar, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent. And if we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you have a hat on, kindly place it over your heart. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments. Public comment is restricted to only items listed on the special meeting agenda. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes in the order received to a maximum total time of 30 minutes. Unless the items have been placed on the published agenda in accordance with the Brown Act, there should be no action taken. No discussion will be made regarding personal issues in open session. All public comments are an important part of the board meeting and are given careful consideration by the governing board. We have one public comment tonight. Mrs. Janae Schwarf.
Jenny.
Jenny.
You're going to see a lot of me, so I'll go ahead and help you. It's Jenny Sharp. No mic. I'm going to use my teacher voice. Is that okay? Can you guys hear me, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah.
There is a mic.
Should I hold it? No. Can I just use my teacher voice? Oh, you can't. Okay. Oh God. All right. So. Getting text. So today's meeting is all about team building and trust. Dr. McClay is offering you all an opportunity here, and I hope that you take advantage of it by truly listening and learning. You three new board members had an opportunity to build trust with the teachers and students of TVUSD when you joined the board by visiting classrooms, speaking with teachers, getting to know the schools in your trustee areas. But instead, you decided to use your newfound positions to erode any possibility of teaming up with teachers and staff when you not only lied in your campaigns accusing us of teaching sex and racism to our students, but by also voting to ban the teaching of true history before ever stepping on to a campus. So we do not trust you. Since you created this crucible of animus and distrust, it is incumbent on you to fix it. Stop focusing on the Seven Mountains mandate. We are not a religious organization. Stop focusing on following extremist views that have nothing to do with what happens in TVUSD classrooms. We are not a political organization. Your actions have sown nothing but division and derision in this valley, and we do not trust you. Jen. A couple of ways you can build trust with your constituents, one of which I am, is to 1, stop saying you talk to hundreds and thousands of people and waving papers around. You did not knock on my door nor my best friend's door. You door knocked on your own echo chamber, so you fed your own biases. Start building trust by listening to your whole team, all of the parents and students you're supposed to represent if you truly want to build trust, because we do not trust you. The second way that you can build trust is by publicly denouncing Chauncey Killens. He's been terrorizing students as young as 5 in front of schools across the district for the past year, and yet he campaigned for you. At the last meeting, he harassed students by not listening when they asked him to leave them alone, and he declared that a student and teacher should be lynched. As long as you stay silent, actually, as long as any of you stay silent, you are complicit, and we will not trust you. As long as you continue to make these meetings about your agendas instead of what is good for this community and its most important members, the students, we will not trust you. The 3 new board members have quite a bit of work to do to earn the trust of the people, so I encourage you to get to it.
Thank you. Now we're on to the board workshop continuation of board member ongoing, and I will hand it over to Dr. McClay.
Thank you. So I'm actually very excited tonight to have the opportunity to bring our board together. It's relatively common, especially when you have new board members, to come together and to work on some team building, some trust building, really with the ultimate goal of eventually uniting around a common purpose. What is it that we as a collective team want to accomplish in our school district? So I'm excited this evening to have 2 amazing, amazing retired educators to facilitate this workshop. They are consultants from Leadership and Associates. We have Dr. Michael Lynn, Dr. Sandy Lyon, and I'm going to turn it over to them in the hopes that we can really get to the meat of it without listening to me talk too much.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. A little out of practice. Okay. Well, good afternoon. We're really glad to be here. I'm Sandy Lyon. We're going to introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about the purpose here. But before we do that, I just wanted to commend all of you for being here this afternoon to do this work. This is foundational. We're going to talk about it in a minute, what we know from research in the literature around the importance of trust and trust building to create a smart and healthy organization, which is what we all want for our school districts, because we know smart, healthy organizations best serve their students and the communities in which they live. So we're very excited to take you through that. We're going to be the facilitators. Our goal, we will talk a little, we're educators after all, so you will hear some of the content. But really what today is a structured conversation with some background material, some information, with the sole goal of allowing you as board members, as newly elected officials, and your cabinet and your superintendent to have the opportunity to get to know each other. I can tell you that you never do this naturally at the dais, right? It just doesn't happen where we have that kind of formal conversation where we talk a little bit about who we are, where we came from, and how we came to be in the seats we're in today. So that's going to be one of the foundational things that we're going to do. Just have a little more insight into, we all have surface pieces. We'll talk later about the shift from a campaign mindset to a governance mindset. But we all have a background, we have experiences that's important for us to get an opportunity to share. The regularly scheduled board meeting is not the place for that. So you're crafting time so that you get to do that. And what we know is the better we know each other, the more we understand what's happening in that discussion, the more trust we build, the more honest we can be, and the more we may not agree. And we're not here to say you're going to all have unanimity around all the issues that you face. But what we hope is building that foundation of trust, that there's a better opportunity for us to come into those discussions with our eyes wide open. And as I used to tell my cabinet, listening as if our minds can be changed. Because that kind of dispositional listening gets to a different conversation than if we're already set with where we're headed. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, then I have my colleague here jump in. Sandy Lyon, longtime superintendent. 13 years in the seat. I was superintendent principal of a 1-school district in Northern California, where I like to say I did everything but drive the bus. I did not have the appropriate licensing for that. And then I spent 5 years in Santa Monica, Malibu, and retired from Palm Springs Unified. Teacher, principal, that traditional route, middle school person in my heart. Spent a lot of time as a teacher principal at the middle school level. My husband's is a retired teacher. He spent 24 years teaching high school, second career guy, went back. I have 2 grown sons. My oldest is an attorney, married to a wonderful young woman, and my youngest is also a second career teacher, and he's in his first year teaching 6th grade. So it's been a great year for me to just kind of be grounded to what it feels like once again to be that first year person in a classroom. So I'm glad I have that perspective now as well. And we're going to get into a little more sharing, so I'm going to leave it at that right now. But I know you want to know who are these people and why are they here. And so we do a lot of this kind of work. Ms. Wiersma asked earlier if we did it, regularly. This is the season for board governance workshops, so we're pretty busy right now. And again, commend you all for being here today.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you all. I want to begin by thanking everyone today and Jody, your leadership, and the board, I think your wisdom and that understanding, building trust. You're gonna hear saying trust, that word quite a bit, because that's the reason why we're here. But we are facilitators, we have a curriculum, that's as far as we can take you. And the outcome of tonight is truly up to you individually. And open your heart, open your mind, and to keep one thing in mind. I got to know some of the newly elected board members, and quite honestly, everyone. Joe didn't get an opportunity to talk to you earlier. You were getting ready to start a meeting, but wanted to say congratulations to you as a unity. You guys are together. Temecula Valley, I don't have to tell you. Before I get into my background, I came out of Corona-Norco Unified School District. I was there for 13 years as a superintendent for 9. But you know, one of the district, often a lot of the district look up to for innovation, and we have 24 school district in the county. We all do great things, but a lot of folks look up to you for modeling and for good work, and a lot of it for leadership and unity. Your community depending on you to serve the children together. So we're excited here to help you and trying to get that on track and continue to move forward as a unity. It's a fun thing to do, and we're just blessed to have the opportunity to do that. With that said, as Sandy, I've been a superintendent with Corona-Norco for 9 years. My 30 years in education, actually, I only taught 3 years. That was not the intent, believe me. I wanted to coach, and so I left engineering and went into to teaching and coaching, actually. And Danny and I were just talking about sports quite a bit. Just one thing leads to the other. I ended up going to administration pretty quickly in 8 different school districts. And 15 of those 30 years, believe it or not, human resources. So that's what I consider my background in public education. I learned a lot. And so that's kind of what brought me here. And just thank you, Sandy, for the opportunity. And thank you all for having us. Looking forward to it.
All right. So I'm gonna have Lene put that up for us. We'll have some slides, and I think everyone can see them regardless of where you are. If you could go to the next slide, we'll just do a quick overview of the day. So as a good friend of ours, Carolyn Boehner always says, a good agenda is there just in case you don't have something else to talk about. We are very comfortable, and that's not for your regular board meetings. That's for this kind of a meeting. We're very comfortable, depending on where the conversation goes, in not covering all of the material. We're mindful of your time as well. We have a series of things we hope to get through, but I just want you to know that this isn't that kind of workshop where we need to be rigid and adhere to a time schedule. Before we start, the other thing is just breaks. I'll take a dipstick check a little bit later and see if we need to take a quick break. Sitting, as we know, is the new smoking, and we all sit way too much, so if we can move around, we will try to do that. So what we have today is we're going to do a few more welcome and introductions. The introductions part for you all is embedded in the next section where we're going to just tell a little bit more about ourselves than we would normally reveal in just a coffee somewhere. And we're going to do a little leadership yoga, and we're going to ask everybody to participate in really thinking and reflecting on what they really want to accomplish this year, what they're thinking about as they look toward the rest of this year for 22-23. And then we'll talk a little bit about the smart and healthy organization work, the Lencioni work, and how it pertains to organizations writ large, but certainly to public school institutions as well. And then we have a reading, The 4 Traits of Governance Team Mindset, but snuck in there, it's not on the agenda, but Mike and I have been talking over the last few days, and one of the things that he had just done and was successful somewhere else, we always, good teachers and educators, we borrow, we don't steal, we borrow each other's work. And so he just did this with another school district in Southern California. And it's something that has been around for almost 20 years, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. Good work, and so there's a piece there we want to sneak in. And then we have a short reading, and then hope to leave with a metaphor for all of us to think, because the brain anchors differently to a metaphor than it does to literal interpretation. So sometimes it's nice to have a big picture thing that we can think about as we go forward in the work. Any questions about that? Sound okay? And I'm really glad we have the whole team here, because I think it's really important. Mike and I talked about this before. And so thank you, Jody, for having your whole team here. One of the things that you all rely on each other as staff and board to have good discussions, to have the background, to have the information. And I go back to what we talked about at the beginning, having those underpinnings of relationship beyond just we know people, and then, you know, we've all been in that setting where you've known somebody for 5 years, 7 years, and something's revealed that you're like, I never knew that about you, and it gives you great insight. So we're hoping to bubble up a few of those things today in this meeting, so you have some of those underpinnings as we move forward. What we wanted to show you, though, as we start, was this graphic, because as Simon Sinek always tells us, we want to start with the why. We always like to get to the what and the how, but the why is really important. Why are we doing this? In his book, Patrick Lencioni really looks at, and it's not framed positively, it's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So you see the negative on the right side. But what it really shows is that what you need to be a functional team. And so if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, what really starts a team out on the wrong foot is that absence of trust. If that's not there, the rest of the pyramid is going to have a lot of structural issues. So absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and then ultimately what that leads to is an inattention to results. When we're focused, we're unable to focus because we're focused on all the discontent that we have in the organization. We don't get to where we're really trying to. And so on the left in blue, the cohesive team, which is trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. Trust is foundational, and it doesn't happen overnight. There's a speed of trust, which we've talked about and alluded to, and certain action steps and dispositions have to be in place in order for that to happen. Did you want to add anything?
No, we're good and ready to transition if we like. So the next slide is really an activity, as Sandy had talked about earlier, about just, again, the word trust, and I said that earlier too. We're going to be hearing that quite a bit today, and the reason why we're here. It requires a commitment too. You know, when you are building trust, if you give trust and you don't receive trust, that's not going to go very far. So we're asking everyone to commit. And how do you commit? Well, we're going to do something that's kind of fun. Add this next slide, if you look up, or on your PowerPoint presentation.
Nope, you were right.
Oh, good.
Yep,
Well,
go
we
back
were,
one.
yeah.
Yep, perfect.
Is we're going to do a little bit kind of an icebreaker, so to speak, right? And I'll even begin by modeling. You guys met me for the first time for the most part. But really for each other to have an opportunity to go just a little bit deeper. If you remember that triangle in the earlier slide, I think the word next to lack of trust is invulnerability, right? Vulnerability is required. And so I'm asking all of you as participants this evening as we go through the exercise, and to keep that in mind, because I want you, Sandy and I, we want you to take away as much as possible of the reason why we're here today. After all, on a Valentine's evening, I want to make sure that the time's worthwhile. And so I'll begin. There are 3 questions, and then keeping in mind, again, a little bit of vulnerability to get to know a little bit of one another, to go a little bit deeper. And so there are 3 questions. Pretty quickly we'll go through, and I'll go through them. Where was I born? And also the place of birth of order, right? So for me, I'll reverse that a little bit. I am the oldest of the 3. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. I was born, actually, and raised in Taiwan. I came to this country when I was 13. People ask why. I'm telling you right now, there's no other reason why. From a middle family, class family from Taiwan, where parents will give up everything and say, we're going to move the family to this other side of the earth. What, right? Well, my dad, for whatever reason, thought the best opportunity for my kids is actually on this other side of this earth, a place called the United States of America. And why? Because abundance of opportunity, especially the education system. Now, where did he get that? I don't understand. To this day, I need to ask him, actually. But we came. And it is because the public education, we're beneficiaries, my family. My sister's a teacher, 25 years in the making. She teaches special education, 8th grade. The toughest job, in my humble opinion, that you can have, but she's doing that for a long time. She loves it. She loves her kids. I just recently transitioned from working full-time into part-time now, doing this work, and it's been a blessing for me. And my brother's a physician. None of that would happen. None of that would happen. It wasn't for the opportunity that was afforded to me and my family here in America. So we're very, very blessed with that. And where I grew up and went to school. When we immigrated to the United States, my parents worked in a factory, and there was a aerospace factory called Aerojet. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's in the Azusa area. So we grew up in Azusa. Went to all the elementary. I was there for 1 year. and I was actually put back because of my language barrier. And then graduated from Azusa High School, so I'm a local in the San Gabriel Valley. And so obviously the significant challenge I had to face is really coming in at the age of 13. I knew no English, but sports, Danny, got me through. It gave me confidence. I made a lot of friends. And so and here I am today with you fine folks this evening. So that's an example of going a little bit deeper. You don't have to go as lengthy as I, but to the extent that you're comfortable, okay? So I'm going to say we're going to begin with, if it's okay, Danny, my partner, but you just know it, right? I know it's
How did I know you were
all
gonna
right.
do this?
You know me, Danny, yeah.
You're gonna let me lead the charge here.
There you
All
go.
right, I'll do my best. So where I was born, my place of birth, or my place in the birth order. So I was actually born at Long Beach Naval Hospital. My father was a career military man and was actually still stationed in Germany when my mom went into labor with me, and it's since been torn down, so it no longer exists. I am the middle child of three boys, my older brother Joe and my younger brother Gabriel, all biblical names. Thank my mother for that. I grew up mainly in Garden Grove, California. I went to Rancho High School. Well, I went to Rancho Alamitos Middle School and then Rancho High School. And oh man, this last one's hard. So significant challenge I had growing up. So I guess I'll couple those two together, because kind of where I went to school and the significant challenges that I faced. My entire childhood was a challenge. I did not have a great childhood. It was very traumatic for a lot of different reasons. I've shared this with a couple of you a little bit about my background and my story, but at 15 years old, my sophomore year in high school, I actually attended that year of high school in jail. I was a ward of the California Youth Authority. I found myself addicted to methamphetamines, and like we shared, it was actually my love of soccer that helped to kind of pull me out of that, and I focused on sports and then later on in my life, my relationship with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ that pulled me out of that. But I think it was really impactful because it kind of pushed me towards where I'm sitting today, because I was one of those kids that was left behind, at a young age. And so to be able to work towards and give back and share some of my experience, my story, and how I overcome some of that, I think was really important. So.
Thank you.
Wow. Being
Good.
vulnerable.
Follow
Thanks,
that.
Dan. Yeah. No, literally, I got nothing. I'm super boring. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. My mom's whole family is from the South. So really, if I go to the South, I go right back into the Southern accent. I grew up in, birth order. So I'm the baby, which most people are not surprised that I'm the baby, but I called it a mistake. My mother lovingly called me a surprise. I was 10 years after my closest sibling. So my brother was 14, I had a sister who was 11, a sister who was 10, and then me came in and spoiled the family for the rest of them. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. My dad was a contractor with the government. He worked at the Pentagon for many years. And then when I was in the middle of high school, which is probably my significant challenge, we moved out here to Escondido. So I finished high school in Escondido. And that was probably the hardest thing that I went through, was switching from where I was born. And back then, no internet, no Instagram. It was like paper letters with my best friends I'd had since kindergarten. So that was a really big challenge for me. And then I did the exact same thing to my kids and moved them very far away from their friends in the middle of high school, back out here. After I graduated from high school, I went to college in Utah and then met my husband there, got married, had all our kids there, and every single day wished I didn't live there, wished I lived in Southern California. And 10 years ago, my dream came true, and I got a job down here, and so moved the family right in the middle of high school for all my kids, which, I don't know, they might be listening. I don't know if they'd say they thought that was a good thing or not, but yeah, so that's about me.
I've already shared this story with Joe and Danny in conversation, so I'll try not to be too boring again. I was born in the Bronx, the middle child, older brother, younger sister, who, much like Allison, was oops. We were all, my brother and I were 9 and 13 when my sister was born. I was able to get into school early because of when I was born, so I was always the youngest in my class. And I followed my brother through school, and then my sister followed me, which was really bad for her because my brother was a great student and I was a good student and my sister was I skipped a grade in elementary school, and then I skipped a grade the way they did it in New York. I skipped 5th grade and I skipped 8th grade. So I graduated high school, I was 16. My wife and I met when we were in high school. We dated through high school, and we've been married 55 years. I got my bachelor's degree. At 20, I started teaching. That September, I got my master's degree in education, and then my 6-year certificate in supervision. I taught 35 years in New York City. When I retired in 2002, we stayed in New York for a couple of years, then we moved here. My son and my daughter both live here. I have a son who's an attorney and 2 grandsons, and my daughter lives in Temecula. And my biggest significant challenge growing up was I was always the youngest. No matter where I was, whether it was elementary school or college or taking the teaching exam or starting to work, I was always the youngest, and that was a big deal for me.
So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. That's what my family will tell me, and I don't remember much about it. We moved out to San Diego when I think I was 4 or 5. My dad got a job with General Dynamics, so I consider myself a California girl. So grateful to have loving parents. I'm the firstborn, so a little bit more type A, you could say, and I have an amazing sister. My mom and sister have both been in education for years. My mom was a middle school teacher. Her heart is with those kids, and I just saw how much she gave and how much she mentored them. I went to school in a variety of places. I went to a regular public school, I attended a Christian school, and then we were homeschooled in middle school, and it was largely because I was a gymnast at the time and just thought I was gonna make the Olympic team. So I've always been a big dreamer. My mom will tell you I turned circles hoping I would turn into Wonder Woman and had my rope to make people tell the truth. I wanted to be a Barker's beauty, and I'd walk around the house and model furniture and make a fool of myself. But I did tell that story later at the Price is Right show and got on and kissed Bob Barker on the cheek and won $10,000. So dreams can come true on different levels. And anyway, so I had a great education. I went to Christian Heritage College after graduating from Tri-City Christian High School. So again, I did the full gamut. Was thankful for my homeschooling years as well. And I think this really plays well for me in being a trustee because choice is wonderful and we have that here within the district. So I can understand folks who are looking at charters or some of the different options that we have. I can speak to that. And I absolutely love this community. I've been here for 17 years. A significant challenge I had is I blew out my knee when I was 15 years old in gymnastics, in a gymnastics meet. I was vaulting, so ran down the runway, twisted, landed, the mat moved, and I snapped everything. Landed on the mat, my dad came running down the stairs, fainted dead away. We thought he was having a heart attack and I was crippled. So from that point, I kind of saw the dream of all things gymnastics die, which was fine. I went through 3 surgeries, had a huge brace for a year, and then segued into cheerleading and tumbled with a huge brace because I am that person who's always determined if a door shuts, God's gonna open another one, and you're gonna go through with purpose. So I'm just thankful my parents got me through that. When I got married, I met my husband probably 3 or 4 years after college, had 3 kids in 3 years. That was a crazy time. Any of you that are mamas, you know, it's nuts, and I love them to pieces. They're 18, 19, and 21. I have such joy in each one of them. They're not perfect kids, but they're amazing. And they've gone through our schools here. And so I think that's brought me here knowing I'm on the other end, somewhat an empty nester. I have one senior left. And so this was where I thought I could pour a lot of my experience and my heart and appreciation for the community. And my kids could say, you will not be on my back. You'll be too busy working and doing school board. And then they're grown and flown and just headed that way. And I'm just grateful really for all that God has done, and hope that over the next few years I can convince teachers and parents and people that don't necessarily see who we are now that I have a lot to give. So thank you for facilitating this tonight, and hopefully we'll all walk away as different people. So.
Thank you. Pretty complicated here. Well, I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital in Wiesbaden, Germany. My mom's full German. My dad got out of Vietnam and met her. She lived above a restaurant, a guest house. I'm a firstborn son, and let me see here. Yes, where I grew up. So I went to 7 different schools, K through 8, all around the world, and then 4 different high schools. Let me see if I can remember them. Colorado, Alaska, Texas, North Carolina, California, Kansas, Germany. That's K through 8. Then high schools, Panama, East LA, Sure High School. During the Panamanian War, we had to get pushed out while my dad served a hardship tour down there. And then I went back to Germany and then New York. So tying that in, one of my good friends through all that, one of my hobbies, I loved skateboarding in high school. So I was telling Steve that one of my good friends in high school is a pastor in the Bronx, where he's from. I just got to find the street that his church is on. I keep on forgetting to do that. And then tying this in, Danny said he loved soccer growing up. I didn't play growing up, and I'm like, Mom, why didn't you teach me soccer? She's like, well, because I married your American dad, and I didn't think you would enjoy it. I'm like, so all I love is soccer. True story, me and Danny played on the same team, scored a goal each in 20 minutes. Birdsall Park.
Wow.
Yes, and so you might say diversity is my middle name, as far as I've been around the world as a military brat, and then I was in the military myself. One of the struggles I had growing up was I didn't have a hometown. Like, where are you from? I don't know how to answer that. And I had vision problems. I was born cross-sighted. This is hilarious. My sister can attest to this, but if you saw me before I was 5 and a picture smiling, one eye's looking at that wall, one eye's looking at you. And so I had 2 eye operations to fix that. My dad said, you gotta wear these glasses, Joseph. And I'm like, no, I don't wanna wear them, Daddy, because I had a band around my head. And he kept on trying to pressure me to wear them. And I was a little kid, and I took a huge boulder and I smashed him in the kitchen sink. And I said, I'm not wearing these. And my dad's like, okay, you're not wearing them. And then my vision went perfect. So that not having a hometown, and I think, yes, that about covers me. Yeah, for now. Thank you.
Keep going? Yes, please.
Okay, all right, I'll go quickly. Where I was born, Long Beach, California. Mom and Dad were junior high sweethearts. I was the firstborn of 3. Very much the type A of the family. When my sisters come over, and if they're watching tonight, I hope they're laughing. They like to mess with me by mixing up the pencils in the junk drawer because they all need to face the same way in my house. Give you a little insight into how I'm wired. I grew up in Westminster, a little city right there near Midway City, Fountain Valley, Garden Grove, Huntington Beach. I went to school there, K-12, Starview Elementary, Vista View Middle School, and then over to Marina High School. A significant challenge. This one is hard for me because I recognize, and I'm so thankful that I feel like I've been very, very blessed. Oh, incredible family, loving parents and grandparents and everybody. I mean, we still do Sunday dinner as a big extended family every week and have for my entire life. It was really important to my parents. My dad called himself an Army brat, having moved around and gone to, a couple dozen schools. So when he and Mom married, they said, we're gonna buy a house and we're gonna raise our family here and never leave. And so they spent almost 40 years in that first house. And so I recognize I was very, very blessed. If I had to pick a significant challenge, it would be connecting to school. School was a means to an end for me. I was a dancer and couldn't wait for the bell to ring and get to the dance studio. That's what I cared about. And I never really felt connected to school. And I think that's part of my why today, and why I'm so proud of what we do, is walking into every classroom and seeing how that's no longer the case. It's not an 8 to 3 where kids go through the motions and do page 12 today because they did page 11 yesterday. We truly connect kids and hook them on school and the people that are there who love them so much. So while it was a challenge, I think I've kind of flipped it into why we do what we do, or why I do what I do.
What kind of dance?
Well, I started as ballet, tap and jazz, and then went like musical theater.
Okay, I actually know my team here quite well, and I might actually be the only one at the table. I'm actually an only child. I have no siblings, and what's interesting about that is I have one son, so he's an only child. But I was born and raised in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area, and moved actually to Tucson to go to the University of Arizona. And moving from Phoenix to Tucson, I thought I was getting away from home. It's literally 65 miles down the road. But I went to the University of Arizona, graduated with my bachelor's and my master's, and actually will have my doctorate degree in the next month from the University of Arizona too, so I will complete that. So yes, thank you. It's been a journey. It's actually where I met my husband. We'll be celebrating 30 years come this June, which is quite a blessing. I have, as I said, one son who graduated from Chaparral High School here, who went through our system here in Temecula Valley until he graduated and is now currently a naval pilot. And he's living life in Italy right now, so life is good for him. I would say my significant challenge growing up, I went to a private Christian school from probably preschool till about 6th grade. My parents divorced in 6th grade, when I was in 6th grade, and I needed to transition at that time to public school. I mean, we've all been in middle school at one point. It's a hard time to transition, and many of those kids already had a friend network, and I came into a middle school in about 7th grade and really struggled with that. And my team knows I'm a very social person, I always have been, but came into a really hard time in middle school with no real friends, no connections, at the same time dealing with my parents divorcing. But again, I worked through that. High school was not necessarily my favorite time. It was tough because again, I didn't have necessarily those friend networks. But I was involved in golf and I was involved in softball, and those things kept me extremely busy. But again, feeling very blessed for my journey through all of that. And yeah, I think that's my story.
I was born in St. Jude's Hospital in Orange County, Fullerton. I'm the middle of 3 daughters, no sons, and my mom is one of 4, and 3 daughters, 1 son. There's a lot of females in my family, and my mom grew up in Orange County. My grandmother grew up in Orange County. Her mother grew up in Orange County, so we were a very much Southern California-based family. But my younger sister was born chronic asthmatic, and the doctor said after they resuscitated her multiple times in her first year of life, you gotta get out of the city. So I found myself in Temecula in middle school, made that transition, and spent the rest of my time here. I am from an era and a working class family, if you will, so it was the college isn't for everyone kind of mentality when I was growing up. And so I am proud to say I'm the first one to graduate college on either side of my family. My dad is born in Mexico, and so my grandparents don't speak English, but he moved to Southern California, and that's where he met my mom in high school. But again, my mother was married, 2 kids, and divorced by 19. So talk about challenges growing up, twofold. One, moving in Orange County. When I was there in Anaheim, everyone kind of looked like me. And I moved to Temecula, and I was very much fish out of water. And finding where I fit in. My mom is blonde hair, blue eyes, looks like she could be a Brady Bunch kid. My dad, as I mentioned, first language Spanish, born in Mexico. So kind of feeling like, where do I fit in and who are my people, was challenging elementary and middle school. And being raised in an apartment, is complicated also. No front yard, no backyard most of my life. But then I hit my stride in high school. Thank goodness, found some friends, and I twirled baton, which if you've ever met any of my family, they love to tell people and would like to encourage me at 42 years old to attempt to still do it for anybody who will watch. So, but that really gave me purpose, though, is, I got a job, I started commuting down to Palomar, ended up transferring to Cal State San Marcos, and ended up figuring out actually college could be for everyone. You don't have to be a certain set type of person in order to find success. So I moved to San Diego and then LA after college, and I found myself, I'm a CPA, and so I found myself auditing school districts of all things. Actually, San Gabriel Valley, I was in Alhambra Unified for a while, and I said, if a position ever opens up in Temecula Valley Unified, I will make my way back there. That is my dream, because this is the district that I'm a product of. And sure enough, my position became available. I left LA County, and now I'm here. So I grew up here, I graduated here, I work here, and I have 2 little girls. They're a TK and second grader now who are also in this school system.
So some similarities thread throughout, which is really interesting to learn. I was born in Tucson, Arizona. Yes, my dad was in medical school there, and my mom was a nurse, and but they had already met in 2nd grade, so they knew each other that whole time. But I am the oldest of 5 children, but it's 2 girls and 3 boys. My dad always said that we're lucky he had the 2 girls first, because if it had been reversed, they probably would have stopped at the 3 boys. But I'm lucky because my sister and I are only 13 months apart, so we really shared that role of being the oldest. She definitely fulfills that as well. So we kind of shared the oldest role together with our younger brothers. When my dad got a position as a pediatrician in Oceanside, we moved when I was 4. And I grew up in Southern California in San Diego County. And so I attended school there, elementary, middle, high school. Actually met my husband in 7th grade at our school. And so had the opportunity to really grow up, even though we had a couple places we lived, but with a steady group of friends, many of who I'm still best friends with, people I met in 1st grade. And a significant challenge that I had growing up, well, I loved school. Obviously, I never left. I've been in education pretty much from the time I left high school, even in my college years, just volunteering and working at different schools. I came home from kindergarten my first day and told my mom I knew I was going to be a teacher because of how much I just fell in love with school the very first day. So I've had a lot of blessings in my life growing up. And I've also had, your typical experiences with grief and trauma in different ways that we grow up. But a significant challenge that I had growing up was helping people understand in my desire to work with others and represent others and speak on behalf of others and lead, that my decision for optimism was sometimes misunderstood for also being naive and not understanding what other people were going through, even though I felt very passionate about working with others who were in need. And so it's always been just kind of looking back, a challenge of mine to say, no, I can speak, I can be a part of this too. And just my choice for that being kind of turned me into this optimistic realist where I have a good foundation and grounding in reality, but just choosing that optimism and the outsight that things can be better. you know, and we can always innovate to do that. And so that was always, I felt like I always had to stand my ground as a significant challenge growing up to say, no, I can do this too, even though it may not appear that I can, because I have a smile on my face over here. So it helped me really in my roles that I've been able to fulfill in my future too. So on to you, Frank.
All right. So I was born in a place in Mexico called Mexicali, Baja California. The state is Baja California. And it's actually a border city near Imperial Valley. And I am, believe it or not, the youngest of 8. So my mom had 7 oops babies before she had me. And then when I was about 5 or 6 years old, eventually we, my mom, who was a single mom by that point, decided we need a better and brighter future. And so came over to the U.S., settled in Coachella Valley, and grew up in the rural areas of Coachella Valley, like Coachella and Thermal and Mecca and some other regions there. And let's see. So I think that the biggest challenge was being a single mom. My mom worked 2 jobs, manual labor, farm labor. And so poverty, and kind of growing up in apartments. And then I vividly remember being kicked out of one apartment and having to move somewhere else in the middle of the rain, and trailer parks and that kind of thing. So there was then this lack of structure and guidance. And so when you're growing up like that, sometimes you tend to make poor choices, which I did. Ended up going to a continuation school out there, La Familia High School. But the never-changing factor that really impacted my life was teachers who continue to just believe in me and push me and say, hey, you've got something special, and keep at it and never give up. And at some point, one of those teachers taught me how to play the guitar, and I completely fell in love with music. And then years later, some others said, you should graduate, and then you should try to go to college. And I got I got a 1 in a million shot to go to college after I graduated. Met the love of my life there, and she's got to be hearing this because this is Valentine's Day. And so,
This is set up for you, Frank.
yeah, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. And she's in education as well. We have 4 beautiful children, all adults now, officially, as of just a few weeks ago. And one of my daughters is now a teacher. So it's just quite impacting how, the circle and things just kind of come back to, people making a difference in my lives, and now me and my family working to make an impact in the lives of others. And obviously working in personnel, one of the things I try to do is make sure that we have the right people to make the right impact for students. And so I think that's it, yeah.
Good. I agree. I love all the commonalities and all the overlaps that you hear. I was born in Barstow. We'll just leave it there. My dad was a civil servant out at Yermo, and he broke horses, and he was a cowboy on the weekend, civil servant during the week. I am second in the birth order, but I think I'm a little bit of the oldest sister as well, because there's 12 and a half years between my older sister and myself, and then my brother's 3 years younger. And there was a lot of heartbreak and disappointment in those 12 and a half years where they wanted a big family, and that just didn't happen. And then definitely, with 2 of us that came after that. So my sister's more like a second mom, and I feel like I'm an older sister to my brother. And I'm always interested when you hear people who have such deep roots in places, because when I was 8, my dad died. And that creates a rolling stone kind of thing for a family very often when that happens, and especially then. And so we had just moved so my dad could have more property to do the horse thing, and then he passed away. And so I was a latchkey kid. My sister was in college because she's so much older. My brother and I, my mom trying to kind of keep it all together. So that was a significant challenge at the time. But a silver lining was that my mom remarried an amazing man who raised us. And so, you know, I feel like stepfathers don't always get their due, but he was an amazing guy who really did right by our whole family and was what she used to say, I got 50 years, I'll say this on anniversary, just took me 2 husbands to do it. So she had that golden anniversary. But for me, like Minnie said, during that period in particular, teachers were my salvation and school was so important to me and it made such a difference that I really knew that I wanted to, I didn't know, let me rephrase that. I knew I loved it. I thought long and hard about being a teacher because my sister's 12 and a half years older and she was a teacher and I saw how hard, I was 12 and watched her start teaching and thought, oh, I'll never do that. Never say never. It ended up being the best career I could have. So the last thing I'll say is just like Dr. Komrosky, I ended up then moving a lot and ended up, my dad I left, as did Miss Barkley, in high school and finished my high school career in a boarding school in England because my parents went to the Middle East. My dad was retired Air Force, ended up working for aerospace, and so all those disruptions also can be great, but they're also challenging as you frame those new friendships and try to fit in. So hopefully you learned, did you learn something about some of your colleagues and people at the dais? And I think, you know, one of the things, we get into a role. Brene Brown talks about, you know, in different settings, we wear our suit of armor, right? It's what we wear to protect ourselves in a certain role. It's how we conduct ourselves in that role. And one of the hardest things is to share vulnerability, which is what you all just did amazingly. And I always like to, there's a short clip, if you ever see it, of Dr. Brown, where she's getting ready to give a big talk on the importance in healthy organizations. She works with Fortune 500 companies around the world, the importance of this shared vulnerability. And she said, there was an ASL interpreter who said, what's a word you're gonna use that we really need to be able to know? And she said, vulnerability. I'm gonna say it 100 times, so you all need to be consistent on that sign. And so one of them said, oh, it's this. And like somebody's knees going out from underneath them. And she said, oh, no, that's not what I want. And the other interpreter said, oh, it's this. And that's exactly what it really is. When you're sharing vulnerability, you're sharing your heart, and you're giving people an opportunity to not see you in that suit of armor as the board member, as the elected official, as a superintendent, as a cabinet member, but really as a human being who's bringing that full self to the work that you're engaging in. Anything else, colleague? All right. That was great. It's just always so interesting. We're all here, but we've all come from such different paths and different backgrounds and different life experiences. I'm going to move us on to the next slide where we're going to do a little bit more introspection, but now we're going to really think a little bit more about our seats and our roles. I'm going to read these to you, and I'm going to ask you to think for a minute. We're not going to each share all of them, 2 to 3 that really jump out at you. And let me just frame them for you because I don't want you to take them all too literally. So as you all sit here and we're in 2023, we're going to wrap up the 22-23 school year. I am looking forward to meeting. If you're newer on the board, that might be something that there's somebody still in the organization I haven't met. If you're not, it might be somebody you're looking at reconnecting with or, you know, reestablishing. It might be somebody that's new to the organization that you haven't really met yet. This will be a source of inspiration to our district. Productive paranoia tells me I need to be a little worried about. It's always a good thing to have in the back of your mind that thing that, and why do I look at the fiscal person? Like just instinctively as a superintendent, that thing that you might be worried about. The next one says, I want our community and staff to have these 3 takeaways from our second semester meetings. And so whether you're at the dais or whether you're thinking about other kinds of divisional and department meetings, what does that mean for you? And then finally, I'm planning to find strength and resilience from or in, okay? So we're not going to assign those to you. We'll have a little more free-flowing conversation. Let me just give you a couple minutes to star the ones that you want to talk about and share, and then we'll jump in. Let's do that, and then we'll jump into the meeting. Okay. All right, I don't want you to overthink this, so just another minute.
Do you want us to jump in?
I do, thank you, Mrs.
So I know for the new board members, especially Joe, I think he's gone to 8 campuses, and it's been such a joy to hear the different experiences on the campuses that we've had, and I've only been to a couple, and I've loved it. I've loved connecting with the principals, having those real discussions with teachers. I did spend months and months in the neighborhoods, and I think that was vitally important for stepping onto a board. And I will continue to think about those things, but on the flip side, yes, I absolutely love the experiences that I've had so far, and I'm grateful to the executive team for being with us, facilitating that and making sure we can continue to pursue it. I've also been appreciative of the emails coming, come to the choir festival, or, here's the different events. You can read a book and be a part of that. And I think we've all got that work ethic where we want to put that time in a diverse way so that we're not relegated to one topic. We're going to be diverse as we move on, and I think time will prove that. So.
I'll share one or two.
Please.
I just need to be honest here, because what I'm looking forward to is a couple of really boring board meetings in the near future.
Fair enough.
There's been a lot going on. One of the big things, people that I'm looking forward to meeting, continuing to meet staff, teachers, the people that make this district run. But what was really good for my heart and this journey was getting to meet some of the students at the recent Student of the Month event, and hearing the stories and the obstacles that those kids have overcome, and then just the absolute amazing, we got local heroes, we've got, it's amazing. I want to meet more of those students and hear more of those stories and understand, their experiences. So for me, that's.
I'm with Danny. Oh,
Go
you
ahead.
go.
Thanks. Sorry, this font's really tiny on the paper. I am looking forward to learning. I love to learn. I always ask a ton of questions, and I don't know if everyone likes that about me, but that's the way I learned, and I really love to learn. I've been on the board for a little over a year, and I just feel like every meeting, every conversation, I just learned so much, and I'm really looking forward to just continuing that. This district is huge, and as board members, we are far from the experts. We never will be, and so it's fantastic to have such a supportive cabinet and so many teachers and so many people to learn from, so I really love that. Okay, sorry, I thought I could squint through it. So I want our community and staff to have these takeaways. So one is that I'm really here to listen. I think that that's the most vital role that we have as board members, is not really what we bring to the table, but what we can listen and learn and what we can do with that information. All of us have lots of skills. I'm sure we have wonderful resumes, but I'm really here to listen and to work through any situations or questions that people have. I think that's my best role. I love when someone comes to me and says, can you help me? Here's a situation, and I can guide them to the right person to handle that. That's super rewarding. I definitely don't have the answers, but another one I hope the community will understand is that from my perspective, students are our #1 priority. They have to be. There's a lot of competing interests, but no matter what we're doing, we need to go all the way back. I tell my staff at work, we have to ask ourselves 5 whys. So every time you have any situation, well, why? But why? And you go all the way back to the bottom, and I also work with kids, and it's always the kids. So we need to remember that as a board, go all the way to the end, and that the students are our #1 priority. And the other thing I'd love for the community to have as a takeaway is that we need community involvement on so many levels. In relation to the last one, finding strength and resilience, I read every single email. I
think I reply to them all. I don't, maybe not, but I really try to. But all of the messages that people send me, I think are important. Whether they agree with me, they don't agree with me, they have a question, they have a situation, every email is important, and we need people to be involved. And there are so many ways, and I know there's many opportunities for people to be involved that they don't know about, and there's committees where no parents are on. So I think it's really important as we move forward with the board that we continue to help people who come to us that want to be involved, guide them to a place where they can be involved, and help the community to know that we are here to support them and their involvement in our district.
Dr. Komorowski, you were.
I'm looking forward to going to the schools as many times as I can, and finding these hidden gems within the schools, as Barclay just mentioned, the students. Absolutely. I went to Great Oak High School. The very kind Enrique, Lisa, Jerry, and Jim invited me to their school, and I got to see all the, the music, the color guard, and there's a secret gem. The second half of the varsity, and Steve, you know this, that gem of a student, Ashley, who was playing the French horn. Oh my God, yeah. I'm your fan for life, Ashley. So it's situations like that I can't wait to find myself in again, the hidden gems. And meeting as many people as I can, finally getting over to Mrs. Deas and learning all the mnemonics with SPED, which I'm ready to push through it. And I feel like an idiot when I'm at the schools and I'm just hearing all these mnemonics, but that's the learning curve that I can't wait to embrace. And then I think the source of inspiration to our district, all of us come to the table with depth and breadth. For me, I didn't disclose, but one of the challenges with me is being raised in a divorced family is really hard. Like, my mom's full German, she still lives there. I've traveled back and forth. And so for me, there was trauma, behavioral problems in there, and I can relate to, and even being a professor, to all my students, those students who struggle, live out of a car, single parent moms, violence in the home, drug use, whatever it is. And so for me, I often wonder, like, why did God let me live a life like that with trauma as a kid and all this, just no roots? And it's so that I could share that with the people I meet and with the students I encounter. Not that I'm directly involved with students here, but like I said, I have, many of them, but it gives me sentiment. I'm sentimental. I like to hold on to things. And it was because of that growing up as a childhood. I'm more prone to forgive, give people second chances. And that goes for students, staff here. So, I think that relates to team building and trust. I'm here, I'm, ready to learn, and I'm very forgiving. And I'm open to forming these deep relationships over the next 4 years. Thanks.
Guys, don't leave too much room. One of the things that I always wanted to do is visit every school in the district, because I consider every school my school. And I have a folder on my desk. It's not like that. It's about like that. And it's full of emails from parents and teachers like Kelly, who's sitting right there, Kelly Maxey, one of our great CTE teachers. And I do answer every email I get. I make it a point, because I think it's irresponsible, no matter what someone reaches out to you, if you don't respond in a way, whether they like what you do or don't like what you do. So I've tasked Jody and Lene to put me into every school in the district that I haven't been in, starting tomorrow. I think when I think back to myself as a student, I was a pain in the butt. God, I was. I really was. I was so bored in school, literally from the time I started school till I graduated. Teachers always had me doing stuff like I was the office monitor, or I ran the mimeograph machine, or the Rexograph machine, or I rang the bells, or I ran the projector in the auditorium. Not that I was bad, I just was bored. And from the time I started school, I was always, we had these things called the Iowa tests. I don't know if any of you remember. And I always got 99 on the Iowa test. And I would bring it home, my mother would say, "Why didn't you get 100?" I didn't know I couldn't get 100, because nobody could get 100, because the highest you could get was 99. And so when I retired and I moved out here, and I played golf every day for 15 years, and I worked at a golf course, finally I said, you know, I really need to do something else. Golf is fun. My son and my daughter are fun, and my grandkids were born, and they're fun. And then someone talked me into running for the board, and I love it. My best thing is to go to schools. Joe and I were at Great Oak Saturday night for the color guard and the percussion band and the marching band. I have a whole bunch of school visits. We have amazing things. So the three things I want people to know about our district is our amazing CTE programs, the amazing excellence that our teachers provide, and the emotional support that they provide to our students. Those things are critical for a successful school district.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing with
Sure.
one point that we didn't make? I'm going to do this one. So the productive paranoia tells me I need to be a little worried about, and I would say worried that we do need to get to that point of discussing how team building and all the good things that we take away today really correlate to some of the differences that we're going to have. I don't know how much you know about the campaign and the election, but there are some definite things that I think we need to make sure we speak to, because it's one thing to kind of get carried away with platitudes and kind of that surface conversation, which we need to do and respect and love one another. But then below the surface, you've got to get to the nitty gritty and say, so if we're going to move forward as a board and there's a decision where a majority has made that decision, how then do we respectfully deal with that, whether it's personally, whether it's in public? So I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that within the love, we don't go to the true solution building and say, yeah, we got to talk about the reality of stuff that's gone down that's not right. And how can we get through that and still be able to look at each other and say, I'm proud of how I've handled this, and I want to communicate to you clearly. And we may not see eye to eye, and that's the way things might be.
And I thank you for bringing that up. I think we're going to answer some of that, not all of it, but we go through the smart and healthy organization piece. We're going to talk again about why you still have to start here in order to get to those pieces that you're talking about. And then you have work coming up where you're going to go through your governance handbook. So what we're trying to do today primarily are two things: to really give you the opportunity to sort of bridge that interpersonal piece with each other so that you have a little bit of connectivity and understanding of what people are bringing to those conversations. And then leave you with some thinking. We have a piece in here called The Governance Mindset. This is a book a lot of districts up and down around the country are working with. And it's a Michael Fullan Davis Campbell book. So we have a little piece from him that talks about this shift, from the campaign trail to the governance work. And there's just a couple of nuggets in there that we hope will be food for thought as you go through these next pieces. And then after this, you're going to work on that what and how. And here's what I want to say. It's a journey. You never arrive. It's a process, and it will be iterative. But what we hope is that as a board, as you work through these pieces over the course of the first year together, because the first year is all that storming, norming, and forming until you have a sense of how you work as a body. And you work as a body. You are not 5 individual bosses. You are a body that works together to give direction to the superintendent, who then passes that on to staff. So it's a stutter step. It's not an easy, smooth transition, and now we've arrived and everything's going to roll out. But what you will need to arrive at are some agreements about exactly what you're saying. How do we go through that? Have a rich and deep discussion, end up with a vote that may not be in unanimity, and go forward as a body to do the work of the district. And that's, I know, part of what you're going to be looking at shortly. Okay.
So we're going to take a break. Before we do that,
See if Cabinet has anything to add on this piece before we do that.
okay.
Did you have any leadership, we used yoga because we thought it's meant to be stretching you a little, right? Working those muscles. Anything you wanted to share with your board superintendent yeah, let's go.
Okay, let's see. So what am I looking forward to? I put helping to unite this board around a collective vision. So we've spent a lot of time getting to know one another individually, and me kind of asking a lot of questions, trying to figure out your why and what you'd like to accomplish. But now it's up to us to, at some point in the very near future, put that together into a collective vision. So that excites me. What are some things, what would I like our community and staff to have these 3 takeaways from second semester meetings? I wrote down, change is not a bad thing. That there's always room for growth, even in a very high-achieving district. We have not arrived, we're not done. There's always work, and we see that every single day. And then that no matter what, and I think, Mr. Gonzalez, you kind of referenced this, our students continue to amaze us and just absolutely thrive. And so finding continued ways to celebrate that and bring attention to that, I think, are critical. And then the last one, I am planning to find strength and resilience. Oh my gosh, these folks prop me up every day, and you're the reason I get up and keep coming back to do this over and over again. So they give me an amazing amount of strength and resilience. And then what gives me really the most, not to put you guys down at all, are the kids. Just yesterday, I walked in first thing in the morning to the kindergarten classroom, and I sat down with a little one, and I started to tear up, and I said to the teacher, can I just stay here all day? I mean, I really did. I had to be dragged out. And so just that constant reminder of this is why we do what we do, and making sure that we can all enjoy those moments is important.
Okay, I'll just share one quick one. So I know everyone that sits around this table, this is a tough job, regardless of what our position is. It's hard, but I think I'm planning on finding strength and resilience from understanding and recognizing my why every single day. And my why is kids. My why is the incredible instruction that happens in this district. So ensuring that I kind of fill my own bucket and my own reason why by visiting school sites and honoring the teachers who are doing the incredible work every single day to move our students forward. If I make sure that I'm coming back to my why and I'm internalizing it, what do? I bring it to my team, and it resonates and it reminds us what we're all about. And I think we get busy and we get bogged down sometimes in other things, and those other things are important. They need to happen. But always remembering our why and coming back to our why, and that's where I get my strength and that's where I get my resilience from, especially during a time like COVID. I mean, that was hard, and it was incredibly difficult on people, but at that time, I was leading the special education department, and probably one of the biggest challenges of my entire career was how do you do this, and how do you provide students during that time a level of support virtually? But I guided our team, and we just remembered our why every single day. And in my humble opinion, we were successful as we could be during that time. So that, for me, is where I get strength and resilience.
Mine is similar to yours. I'm looking forward to getting back to the work, is what I wrote down. We all had full plates and full-time jobs before our careers were kind of hijacked during the pandemic, and we've been pulled away from the work. There's been a lot of other things that has shifted our attention, and so getting back into classrooms, you know, and getting, all of us have never lost sight of that why, but how we met the needs of students changed drastically, and we're finally getting our footing back underneath us, and I'm just really looking forward to getting back to the great work that we've been able to do and continue back in that same trajectory, because I have a lot of pride in TVUSD. I think a lot of our students and staff do, and being a product of this district, I'm a little biased, but you know, I'm just really excited to get back to the work.
I'm at the risk of sounding redundant for some of my ideas that have already been said, but I'm planning to find strength and resilience from our just incredible students, just their tenacity, what they teach us every day. They teach us more than we teach them. But also our staff, who I'm so blessed to work with and learn from every day. I find resilience and strength in a staff that look forward to coming to work every day because of what they get to provide our students, and leave work every I wondering how they could have done it better. And that's who we work with every day. I want our community and staff to have these 3 takeaways from our second semester meetings. And I'm wearing really my student support services hat in this, that all means all. And that we are student-centered. And that we use data to be solution-driven in this district.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right, so productive paranoia. I think the pandemic really taught us a lot of things. And one of them is staffing shortages are a real thing. And so what I am constantly, I wouldn't define it as worried about, but what's constantly in my mind is how do we get ahead of it? How do we make sure that we are competitive, that we market, and it's got to do with marketing, it's got to do with recruitment and those types of things, but also being creative about ways to make sure that we attract and retain the best staff. So that's always at the forefront of my mind. And what I'm looking forward to is in the last couple of years, we've come up with ways to develop staff's capacity, whether it be HR 101 trainings for our new administrators or our brand new aspiring administrators academy. But I think there's more work that can be done. I think there are workshops and professional development in different areas for both classified and certificated staff, and I'm looking forward to working with my team to come up with ways to do that for our district.
Nice, very good.
So
Thank you.
So we will transition. Before we take a break, though, one last thing I thought maybe we finish the
Okay.
slide on the next page, please. And then I just want to, first of all, say, if I were to record and kind of do a tally of some of the key words and concepts of the previous exercise, it would be learning, teaching, and overwhelmingly students. And if you could see yourself when you talk about students, the way you beam up, I just want to re-echo that to you, and because that's true passion, and that's a really, really good thing to hear, and that we're talking students, and it's for all students within the school district. And I sense that commitment coming from all of you. So I just wanted to feed that back to you, and then I appreciate that. And one last thing I want to say, Mr. Wiersma, is absolutely, because we're sitting at the table here, and you'll see in a matter of scope and sequence that we're going to get deeper into some of the management and strategic thinking that we can maybe offer today, and hopefully down the road with a little bit more of opportunity there. But if you look at this picture around
think
you.
we saved it for Stephen.
I know, right? So I'll tell you what, Stephen and I, we had a little bit of conversation. I actually signed up to be a volunteer at the Torrey Pines, but COVID cut the volunteer staffing by nearly, I want to say, more than half. So they put me on the waiting list. I forgot I was on the waiting list. 7 months ago, I get an email from the volunteer coordinator, says, "Congratulations, Michael." Congratulations, what happened? You have been selected to volunteer at the U.S. Open coming up in May. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, right? So I can't wait. So when this popped up, and obviously Steve and I had a conversation, but I want you to kind of quickly take a look at this before we go to break. And then again, this is leading to our thinking and transitioning into something that's more solid, tangible, strategic of the work that we're doing as a team, right? And the system, okay? But look at the simple picture for a moment. And I want you to tell me what jumps out at you. And I want you to think about it and pay attention to the detail of what you see. What are some of the things that jump out at you about what you see here?
Want us to verbalize it?
Sure. Yep.
Absolutely, please.
Jump in.
When you think you know everything, you're like, I didn't know that you use scissors to cut. Is that for a golf tournament?
Yes, the night before.
And that could be applied to our learning curve at, right now as new board members, integrating ourselves with staff and all that. So, I mean, you just don't have the whole picture. It's layers and layers and layers,
Well said. And I would even say thinking about scissors is something that jumped out at me also. But you would think about, maybe trimmers, right? Because this is grass. But there's a reason they chose scissors. Because it's for the precision of the work that they're doing and the meticulous detail that they pay to the work that they do, right? Anything else jump out at you? Thank you for that Joseph, that's exactly right, the scissors. Anything else?
It's also notable that there's two, so I think the teamwork in life, when you develop that system, you're usually more successful because you should never stay in an echo chamber. I truly believe you should have mentors and people that you work with side by side, so that's what I see.
Well said. It's a team. It takes a team to get this thing done. Anything else from anybody? You notice, go for that.
I'll say it. She kind of stole my point there because it was a team thing, but sometimes when you do a task that seems this minuscule, you get bored, and it is nice to have allies, and it is nice to have relationships with people, because I'm sure they're joking about what they're doing.
That you're not so alone.
You're not in there by yourself.
Well said.
So.
Well said. Joe.
And I would say, God bless the people who are doing a job that I would never want to do.
Well said. Yes, sir.
It's attention to detail.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
Getting down to sometimes the smallest details are important to the overall success of the operation.
And that is a huge piece. And in fact, look at what they're cutting with scissors, right? And how many holes and how many bunkers there is on the course. Imagine doing that for the entire course. So think about the strategy behind what they're doing and why they do what they do. Thinking about just the partnership that you mentioned, Danny, and some of the morale that's generated from this teamwork and the supporting one another. And I think we'll use that kind of as a segue, Sandy.
Sounds
And
good.
we'll take
10 minutes?
10 minutes?
Since
and
there's a
then we'll
number
come
of
back.
us, and stretch, whatever you need to do, and we will come back at 5:35. All right. Thank you all for being so prompt. Appreciate that. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit more into some of the content just to get you thinking about how this all comes together when you think about the foundations of what Lencioni calls a smart and healthy organization. And what he tells us in the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is through a parable that lots of organizations do well on that smart side of the house. They've got some strategy about how they're conducting their business, whether it's a corporate business, a social service, K-12. Technology, we're thinking about that obviously at a variety of levels. Focus on fiscal solvency, boards, that's a huge part of your responsibility. Partnerships, within the community, with other organizations, and then market and branding. You can have all of those pieces, but his position and his research is that when you do not have the healthy side of the house, you still won't be successful. And so our attention, it's sometimes easier to give our attention to that smart side of the house because those are tangible things for the most part. They're easy to make a plan for, implement, purchase, whatever it is that you need to do to implement them. But when you look at the healthy side of the organization, a healthy organization has minimal politics. And I think it's really important that you key in on the word minimal. It doesn't say no politics. It's not realistic in any kind of organization around the globe. So there will be politics, but can the organization keep those minimal so that you're able then to do the work? There's minimal confusion. And Mike's going to talk about this in a minute. But people know what they're doing. They know why they're doing it. They have an understanding of what that flow is. There is a hierarchy of how decision making happens. People know who to go to. I think it was interesting that Ms. Barkley mentioned that earlier, like I know who in the organization to send people to. That's a sign of minimal confusion. But if everybody's doing this, then the organization isn't healthy. Low turnover. Our friend Frank is thinking about that. In a healthy organization, people are not always calculating their next move. They stay for 25 years. They come back after they've gone to school here. They want to be here. The turnover rate is low. Life happens. People move. I'm a mover. That's going to happen. You have people in your organization for a whole host of reasons who are going to move. But it should not be that everybody's looking for an escape valve because the unhealthy side of the organization is putting too much pressure on the folks in the organization. High productivity. You can be busy and not productive because the conditions are not there for productivity. So are these other existing conditions in place, then you will see high productivity. And then finally, high morale. High morale is key. When people suffer from low morale, We know, there's been the term that I think we're not supposed to use in 2023, quiet quitting, right? This notion that people, though, are tired of an organization that doesn't think of them as people, that doesn't consider their interests, that isn't invested in building the organization overall. When we have that, people lose their investment, and then the morale is low. And so high morale is a challenging thing to achieve. But when we focus on the right side of the organization, that morale is built. And so there's a little piece that he says here at the very beginning that I just wanted to read because this is the first paragraph of the introduction. Not finance, not strategy, not technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. And so when you think about the healthy side of the organization, it is all about teamwork. You can be on the smart side, and you can have Nicole working on strategy, and you can have Ed Services taking technology, and Kimberly's doing that, and then you can have Nicole working over here on the partnerships with non-public providers, and Frank's worrying about the marketing and branding, and that can all be well and good. But when the whole house isn't focused on that healthy side, they will do this and not achieve the results. And remember the pyramid from the beginning that you're trying to get to. So that's what Lencioni's trying to do in this work. And I just think reading that first paragraph is so important because it's not easy. It's rare, it's challenging, it's difficult. And to go back to Mrs. Wearsman's comment earlier, it's something that you will need to have as an iterative process. It is not something that, it's a one and done and you've done it today and now everything will be copacetic. This is something that healthy organizations plan for, work through, revisit, and have an iterative process with the players who are part of that executive team. Any comments or questions about that before we?
So Sandy, the mindset that you have just described in terms of, it's on.
You have it on you though.
It's okay.
Okay. Can they hear you?
Yeah, I think so. I've been keeping it there. So the mindset that you described earlier, Sandy, again, it has a lot to do with, just kind of the functioning and the health and of the organization in order to move forward. But I go back to what Ms. Wearsman said earlier, what about the work itself, right? And so if you just go a little bit deeper, and I want all of you to please take a look at what's on the screen there. And don't go into the box just yet. Look at the diagram behind there. You see there are obviously a bunch of gears, right? And you see these gears are what? Connected, right? So the word and the concept of system and functioning as one is absolutely critical. And again, I think this speaks to then the good work that you do. But as Sandy has said earlier, the most important thing is teamwork. Without teamwork, these individual gears, they're just turning. And in a system that's not efficient, that's not healthy, if you will. I'm sure in your auto mechanic class, if you took courses like that, or even if you drive a car, from time to time you know that you need to tune up on the engine. It's because things are not sounding right. Some of the gears may not be turning as smoothly. Maybe you need a little bit of oil job. But in order for the system to work, function efficiently, every single one of these gears has to turn. And if you look at all the divisions sitting across the table from you, they represent these gears. And you represent the entire functioning system providing governance to this team. If you go into now what's inside the box, you hear the word coherence. And Sandy mentioned the good work of Michael Folan. Michael Folan's work about coherence is something that, in my humble opinion, when I was thinking about going back in 2013, 2012, at that point, I don't think anybody's heard of the acronym LCFF. I think everybody can sleep and drink and eat that, right? So there's some kind of funding formula. Again, I don't want to get all geeky on the budget because I have an expert sitting looking at me. But you do remember revenue limit, and there's a different way of funding, right? And at the time, Governor Brown says we need to look at a different funding model, equity model, called the Local Control Funding Formula. But that's something that they're building into legislation, and that's going to impact public schools. But do you remember, at that point, there's another acronym you probably have never heard, LCAP, right? Now we live and breathe and sleep LCAP, because LCAP wisely over time has evolved to become the system, the strategic plan, if you will, that we're working. And one of the things we'll get into a little bit later, if we have time, and certainly if not this meeting, down the road, I'm hoping this governance team will definitely take a look at that, is do not allow redundancy to take place. In all the places I've been at, and some of the people that I work with, they all have great intentions, but there's too many gears out there spinning freely, and they're not connected. And what happens is that the system becomes very inefficient. So I want to go back to coherence just a little bit, because the whole notion of coherence is working and understanding in the time of complexity. What do smart teams do? In a time of complexity, thank you, Danny. A smart team and smart leaders is at that point, at that time, that's critically important that you make simplicity out of complexity. Easier said than done, but this is where coherence comes into play. And if you think about all the different spots in terms of the work you do at different times, in your journey on an everyday basis, even different divisions, you have to have alignment. It's only through alignment and coherence, as Michael Fullen will tell you, we can achieve the most efficient operation in any system, both private and public. And I argue, especially in public education, it is much more complex than even private. I used to work in the private sector. So we rely on people, we rely on teamwork, we rely on asking questions, we rely on vulnerability, we rely on each other, and be forgiving, as the governing board president had mentioned earlier, that's critically important, because at the end of the day, you know, your HR head will be able to confirm that, I believe. Probably 85% of your budget in public education is in people. If you're in the private sector, you got research and development, you got materials, you got all kinds of things for your budgetary needs. But in public education, it is all relational. Without people, without coherence, without alignment, things simply doesn't work efficiently. You guys are a very proud school district, as you should be, long-standing, high-achieving, and everybody's looking at you. I know you want to keep this going for all of your kids, but to keep in mind, in order to do that, especially the next few years, you want to keep coherence and alignment in mind. And I challenge you to keep LCAP in mind, because that work right there is the proud work of all of the staff you have sitting before you, and those who are representing, probably watching on the screen, that's your teaching and certificated and classified staff. They need to hear from you that you understand in a time of complexity, you're going to find simplicity. We're going to do it through coherence and alignment. And finally, oh yes, they are watching. Not only your local community, you know this, again for Temecula Valley, everybody's watching you because you've been doing some great work, and we want to help you to continue to do that. Any thoughts? Sandy?
As we leave this slide, I think the other thing is that, you know, when, oh yes, they watch, one thing we know about leadership is that it cascades, right? So when there's a coherent, aligned system at the top, that cascades, and they watch. They see how are we able as a system to build out that so that we are showing, and it gets back to, I think, the discussion about how do we get to those difficult discussions and move forward. It really is that notion that, especially for our elected officials, but now also for, you know, everybody, everything is, there's nothing private anymore, right? Social media and televised meetings and all that has changed how we interact as a boardroom. Mike and I were talking earlier about, you know, before we became superintendents, there was a time where, you know, information was meted out one little piece at a time, because you had the luxury of doing that, and not everybody knew everything. It's not the world we live in anymore. The world we live in now is an open book, an open hand. People know, make their own assumptions, make their own judgments. So it's just something that as we think about our system, if we could slice it in half and look at it, how does it cascade down? How do we see that whole system built out, the cogs and wheels working together, and then how are we viewed by everybody who's looking at us as a system? This is just an anonymous quote from the book, and I just think it sums up what you're all trying to do here today. When everyone in a system, no matter their official role or position, shares the work of creating change, there is virtually no limit to what can be achieved. And that's a challenge, because it really, if top-down worked, we'd have a lot of evidence of that, but we don't have that, right? And if lack of leadership at the top worked, we'd have a lot of evidence of that. We don't have that either. It really is the both and. Strong leadership, strong leaders, as well as a staff and our employees who are committed and willing to share that work and be a part of that change and move that organization forward. Yes?
Yeah, one point I wanted to make is earlier Dr. McClay talked about collective vision between the board members and then tagging onto this coherence alignment. One of the things that I find missing on the website, and from a purely business perspective, we don't have a vision statement. And I'd like to emphasize that moving forward quickly, that we get on a vision statement. And then the mission and the values, which are priorities on our website. And the vision's where we're going, the mission is how we're going to get there, and then the priorities are our DNA, nuts and bolts. So for me, in order for all 5 elected board members and staff to, going back to the system, an interconnected set of parts functioning to achieve a common goal. But what is it? If we have no vision statement, there is no common goal, and I think it really needs to be out there. So that's something that's missing, and I think we might have a board shop in the future on that. Okay.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up.
Can I add one other aspect? I was thinking about the gears. I know we've moved past that. The tough thing for me, and maybe you can speak to this with all of your wisdom and expertise, is because we're in an era with social media and people creating their own truth and an idea of what's happening, there's competing voices, whether it's different groups in the community who feel strongly one way or the other. There's the union piece where, messages might be going out there. There's the board. And I think part of my frustration has been trying to figure out, how do we really speak transparently to who we are, what we want to do? And I think over time that will meet itself out. But we have newspapers, as you know, that might report something that's not accurate either. And that is a huge frustration for me because, we want to do great things, but there's so many facets there that go beyond the gears, even within the school. So can you offer anything to that, or what you would see as advice, or it's tough?
I'll jump in real quick, and I think these are just things to consider, right? And number one, be a learning team and be vulnerable. What I mean by that is, and we talked about it, people are watching, and that is you represent, and you guys can make the school district to go from good to great, and that's a huge responsibility. But you don't get from good to great from day 1 to day 3. It is a journey, right? And so understand that. And so I would say give yourself a little bit of a break, almost take the burden off of you and free yourself a little bit, and understand that we're going to take steps. Build team first. We're going to trust this team. We're going to have a strategic plan. We're going to follow the strategic plan. When there are dissenting voices, you come back to the strategic plan. Again, I go back to the LCAP. The LCAP has laid out a legal process in which transparency is absolutely required. Your constituents, they all should give input. All the staff members who are behind building that plan and making it a reality in terms of execution has accountability built into that. What I find in effective school district is that they use a strategic plan as their plan, and everybody on board signs up to that. So when there's any questions, you go right back to the strategic plan, which is the LCAP plan. If there's any disagreements or perhaps any thoughts of improvement, guess what? There's a transparent process for that. We welcome that input. So I just feel like when you have, again, complexity, and everybody's trying to tackle this complexity, because people come from good places with good intentions. There's no doubt about that. They're spending the energy and time because they want to improve the system, right? But when you have already a system, don't need to create your own. You go back to the system, you let the system work for you, and that's a smart way to go. And again, I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Warsma, but that's one thing I'll offer to you in a practical manner.
And I do think there's a lot of noise out there, and so as a board, as an elected official, that's a different challenge than it is for those of us who've been staff, for sure. And in a minute, we're going to read a piece that really talks about shifting from the campaign mindset to the governance mindset. And there is a shift there that you just have to go through, because you get on, and I've worked with a number of boards over the years, and they've always said that was such a surprise if they weren't deeply embedded in the system or hadn't been a part of the system before, that you get on the board and there's all this stuff that's already done and in place and said, and when do we talk about that? And so that becomes part of your process for the board work, the vision setting, the strategic planning. And I guess the simplest thing I will say is, at some point as a board, you have to tune out some of that. And it's hard, because those are your people. I think you said it well earlier, all those voices matter, we care about it. But at the end, you are the only people who have the complete aerial view. And that's your job, to have that 30,000-foot view, to listen to all of those constituent voices and to listen to your staff and make those difficult decisions.
No, I think if we all agree that the focus of what we do, I think if we all agree the focus of what we do is the academic performance of our students and the excellence of the district, I think that's our focus, and I think everything else is extraneous. Anything we can do to make sure that we give our children the best that we can, that we have the best teachers, the best classified staff, the best everything is what we're here for, and everything else is extraneous.
I would add too, and just in my day job role, I can attest to strategic planning is so critical, because once you have that strategic plan, it answers almost any question that comes forward to you. You know, in my world, it's like, oh, someone wants us to expand to another site. Should we do that or should we not? Let's consult our strategic plan. What have we decided? And when you formulate that strategic plan, it's made with tons of input from lots of different factions. And I really think that what that creates is the buy-in from the top to the bottom. So as a board, our role is to have that big lens looking over. In my view, this is what it is. It's looking over, not getting into the nitty-gritty, but also ensuring that any decisions we make listen to everyone. So when we come in and make a decision, you know, without good vetting, without good discussion, that's when a lot of those voices bubble up and a lot of divisiveness. So I'm really a proponent for, you know, our district is not at risk of failure. We're not at risk of losing our funds. There's no critical need for massive change at the moment. So my personal tactic would be to listen to the voices, explore, work as a team, gather ourselves together and looking at our strategic plan and deciding what's the best direction to steer this massive ship in a slow-moving way. And there are going to be voices from every side all the time. All of our emails are full of them. And delete button's your friend, you know? You listen, you consider, but then at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to do what's the best for most, in my view.
I think the hard part here is that we know elections have results and consequences, and when the community votes and there's some changes within a board, you have to be cognizant of the fact that change, you want to keep things simple, but there's going to be change. So I think it'll be great for us to move forward with respecting each other and figuring out that process, because I don't know if you know our history, but it's been a little antagonistic for a while, if we're just being honest. But I think if we can balance that, knowing we have a big ship and we know you don't want to recreate everything from the beginning and yet leave facets of change, because that is what constituents want on some level. But I know it's my personal goal to do that in a measured way, and people might argue that hasn't happened up to this point. But like you said, only the person who's gone through a campaign and election process knows the history of what's there and then what they see in the current position. So that's the tough part for me, is knowing we don't necessarily want to go along with what's always been, because elections tend to bring different leaders to the forefront for a very important reason. But we need to do it more circumspectly and certainly respecting and looking for mentorship and advice at the same time. Like, I would never want to negate that aspect. And so that's kind of the struggle that I think we're looking at.
Mrs. Wiersma, I appreciate what you're saying also, Mrs. Barclay, because I think you're saying the same thing. The transitioning, though, is also critical, right? When you have an election season, you have to do what you have to do to get the job done. And so you can represent. But once the season's over, in order to become a very functioning board, that transition going from campaigning to operational, that is that growth as a board needs to take place. And I know Shandy has actually material that hopefully we'll be able to dive into just a little bit, because that's absolutely critical about that. And then the last thing I would add is a strategic plan. A strategic plan should be a living and breathing document. And so that's what, again, I go back to the LCAP. When you have wisdom behind good work that's put in place, you don't just yank out good work immediately and thinking the machine will continue to run. It won't. You got to do it strategically. But that does, again, involve the input from everyone, including constituencies. But if you go back to the LCAP, again, I always go back to the strategic plan. It's built in for that to take place. And the unified voice almost serves as a, I don't want to say a protective wall, but it really is what it is, that this is the kind of the arena we operate within legally, by the way, that this is where we can do our best work together because there's that framework for that. Okay, so I wanted to say that before we move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and I think, well, let's go ahead and advance it, and while we're doing that, I will just say, you know, another great thing today is having cabinet here with you and your superintendent, because this body is what's needed as a body to make some of those changes and shifts over time. You know, I used to always say to my board, if it was that easy, we'd have done it, you know, because we work in a whole system of constraints and rules and regulations, and these are the folks who make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And, you know, what's important, and we've lived through this for years, what's important in November may not be important next November. And so you also, as the board, are always seeing, you know, where is staff coming from? Staff comes to you, and you're looking at data. You're making data-driven decisions. But to Mike's point, you're looking at that LCAP. There are things that are not in there that still may be board direction setting, that then staff will work to carry that out. But I think to Dr. Komorowski's point, it's about having that collective vision, and as Dr. McClay said earlier, that everybody's on board with that. You understand your LCAP. If there's a gap there, you're figuring out as a board, this is something important to us, so you're working with staff to make it happen. I wish we could do that and change happened. Systems are hard to move, hard to shift. But the good news is, as we've said earlier, you are a high-functioning system that's getting great outcomes for kids. And so you're building on something that's already in a strong, strong place with a lot of committed folks. So that's the good news. Not every district is in that position. So, you know, that's a huge credit to your system over time that it's been able to do that. And you will continue, and I just keep saying this, it's a process. There's another quote I'm going to read to you guys in a minute from the book, because it really reminds us that the speed of change and the speed of trust takes some time. And so if you invest in that, and you invest in each other as a board and as a team, and really starting to, you know, work through what you can do, what you want to do, and how long it will take to get there, I think then you're going to see those changes in the movement for your kids in the way you want to.
Well said.
I had a question to throw forward as we move to be cognizant of the paradox that we face. On the one hand, we want to be a united board, but on the other hand, there's very real disagreement amongst the board members. And if we could find a way to exhaust that paradox, to function, to achieve a vision collectively, I'd be grateful if we could get to some of that, because that to me is the most real issue that we're looking at right now.
And I will say, you know, I've worked with, like I said, a number of boards. I've had some unanimity. I've always had differences with the boards that I've worked with. You're going to have that. That's a normal tension of an elected body. And it's more heightened at the beginning. There's a reason why we say Storman, Norman, and Foreman, because that is the natural way that groups of people, when they come together, organize. They storm at first and that's why this work that you're doing today is so important. Then they start to norm, how is this going to work? And then you actually form to become the teamwork that you need to get the work done. Not saying it will be easy, there will be challenges, but I think to, you know, really pointing to the president and the superintendent here, the comments that you've both made about having some unified, agreed upon approaches, vision, strategy, that makes all the difference. And it doesn't mean that there won't be contrarians that say, I still don't like it, but you learn how to work forward as a board for overall. You know, I put your mission statement on the second slide, high quality teaching and learning for all. So you want to create a bigger vision, an aspirational piece, but your mission is stated and you're very clear on that. And to Stephen's point, if we keep that front and center with everything that we do, you're going to find the commonality and the common ground in order to do the work. All right.
Okay.
Yep.
So the comment that was made earlier, and again, I appreciate that because it leads right into, I think we're going to get into this exercise. Before we do that, though, again, is understand and appreciate that going through a real change, and when there's disagreement, but agree not to disagree, so we function as a team, and Dr. Rosky, what you had mentioned earlier, is you got to have deep trust though, right? Because on the day-to-day, we're still human. So when you go through bumps, only when you have trust, you're able to willing to forgive and able to move on. If you don't, what I see is just a lot of friction and a lot of division that results from that. And that's, again, the reason why we took so much time, and Jody particularly had asked us to make sure, you guys, to put in time to do that. Obviously, tonight, one evening, in a couple hours, we won't be able to do that, but at least we're starting that journey together. And as I said earlier, at the start of of our workshop, only you take away what you choose to take away. We're just facilitators. So keep in mind, though, that you guys are here for one thing, and one thing only, and that's abundantly clear. You guys are here for your community. You guys are here for the future of your community. That's your students. So to always keep that in mind. With that said, let's move on to the healthy organizations, and I have a quick exercise for you, because we are going to hopefully get to the notion of trust, and not just talking about trust, but make it a little bit actionable. And if you indulge me, we'll go through the exercise. But before we do that, again, if you take a look at the circle and the 4 quadrants, number 1 says to build a cohesive leadership team, right? So we're beginning to dive into that a little bit. We're doing a lot of work on trust building. That's a major component of number 1. And you take a look at number 2, moving clockwise, is to create clarity. Along the way, we talked about coherence, we talked about alignment, we talked about strategic planning, because if you are clear what you guys are here to do with the right mission and vision statement and the strategic plan, you know what naturally happens? Those who watch you in your community will see and understand and believe that our governance team for our very beloved and high-performing school district will continue. Because you know why? I trust them. I watch them, they're coherent, they're together, they function as a team, and they're proud. Yes, they have disagreements, who doesn't? But they work together, and they work through the disagreements smartly, and they do it cohesively. They will build trust. If they trust you, it's because you trust yourselves, okay? So clarity is very, very important that you continue to keep that in mind. As Sandy has said earlier, things may be clear today, but other issues will come to the table and make it muddy. You continue to work at that. That's why when you go to 3, is to over-communicate clarity. And you're going to continue to do that, and you're going to continue to reinforce clarity. But I can't emphasize enough that once you are clear, the regular folks, I call them, if you will, these are parents. These are parents and family to your to your children in the school district. We owe it to them to communicate that clarity, because the more you communicate, you can never over-communicate, the more understanding they will have. And guess what? Naturally, they will rally behind you because they understand where you're going. Okay. So again, clarity is absolutely critical. I'll pause there for a moment before we jump into our exercise. Thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I've got one.
Yes, sir.
I think I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that the clarity actually has been contributing a lot to some of the distrust that we have. It's a very new system. It's very new. We actually, I mean, in total, I think we have a little over 3 years of actual board experience on our entire board. So it is very new. I know that Mr. Arce and I have been working recently on clarifying things and just understanding the process with a new environment, with the heightened political kind of climate that we find ourselves in. It's easy to fill in the blanks, right? And immediately your mind jumps to, well, okay, is there somebody out to get me? Why is this process so complicated? Well, that's stepping out of construction and into a public school system, right? And understanding that. So I think clarity and understanding and working out these processes and all those things will help and go a long way. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Well said. Thank you.
If I could, I think that we all of us, come from different points of view, different experiences. I was in education my whole life. I know what goes on in schools. I know what a good school is. I know what a bad school is. I know what a good teacher is, and I know what a bad, and it doesn't take more than 5 minutes for me to know. The fact that we're elected is irrelevant to the job that we have to do as board members. We're not passing legislation. We're not voting on immigration reform. As far as I'm concerned, we have one job, and that's the children in this district. And if we bring other personal, political, or personal views into that interfere with that, we're not doing what we're supposed to do. And that's where I come from. And when I say we have one focus, and that's the kids, that's it. That's what I'm here for. I'm not interested in anything else that's outside of that.
So as a caveat to that, I would say you do have to remember the fact that I think we do all have that underlying love for students and want to see the best for them, but you can't separate the fact that maybe passing a resolution about critical race theory is maybe what I would feel would be best protecting a student, because I don't want them to feel like their skin color puts them in a box where all things are determined by that. They're so much greater. So I'm only bringing this in as an example because I do care about our kids and their education, but I may see that differently from Mr. Schwartz, which is okay, right? But you're still gonna have those issues when it comes to passing policy or changes that you may just never see eye to eye on. So again, I think it's coming back to how do we work through that in a respectful way, you know, because the kids are my number one focus. But to me, that's so important. But he may see it differently, and that's okay.
Again, it goes back to the notion of agree to disagree. And in order to do that successfully as a team, you have to have deep trust. You know, I want to come back to our focus. And it's going to take time to do that, and willingness to accept that it's going to take time to build trust. With that, if you would,
I'm sorry, can I just interject one more thing?
absolutely, yes.
I mean, just to speak plainly here, I think one of the issues is that there is not trust. I don't know how we're gonna gain that personally. I mean, I'm totally open to all of these exercises. I've studied this work quite a bit in my work with Boys and Girls Clubs. I've been through many, many leadership certifications, so it's all extremely familiar to me. But you're exactly right that it comes back to trust. And when there's things happening, conversations happening, plans happening where we're not informed about, where we don't understand the process behind it, where there's no clarity on it, there's none. And it just has built in a very short time a lot of distrust. I personally am naively trusting, probably to a fault, as many of my staff would attest to. I always believe people have the best intentions. I always believe that until they prove me wrong. And I am falling into that place now. And it is gonna be really hard for me to move past that because there hasn't been honesty and clarity at all. And so, and while I definitely can agree to disagree, Danny and I have had many conversations and it's been super productive. And we do agree to disagree on quite a few things. However, we can have those conversations. And I have never found anything Danny has said to me to be misleading or false or dishonest in any way. And that's why I think I can have those conversations with him. But, you know, other conversations, I don't get those. I don't get return emails. I don't get return phone calls. I don't get information. And so I don't know how to move past that until, you know, people are being honest.
And I think
So
part of
that's
that
where I stand.
I think part of the paralysis is we're learning. So with the Brown Act, there's things you can or can't do. And we were so careful in some ways to do what we needed to do with our due diligence there. But then, you know, as other meetings rolled out, we've been accused of other things. And it's really tough because we're trying to do what's right and be transparent, and we do need to build relationships. And I felt like at the last meeting, we did have a chance to agree on some things that we passed, and that was such a great feeling to me. And coming off of a campaign, it is hard because you get in a certain rhythm. And I know Allison in particular, we mentioned getting together and doing coffee, and I'd like to, but it's really not going to be an easy thing to build trust. And I think in the last meeting, you probably assumed that we did the worst thing. And we didn't. And so there's that frustration on our part. Right, but and that's what's difficult is I don't know how we could convince you otherwise, and we're always trying to abide by the rules and the things that we're learning. And so,
And we have,
know?
we can have advice. That's why we have advice. So if we want to have conversations and we're not sure if we can, we have people to give us that advice.
Right, and we
So
get that.
we don't have to operate in that vacuum of just telling us nothing. And honestly, I mean, it's the motivation. It's the questioning the motivation. And you're right, it's not gonna be cleared up until it's proven, because night one,
Yeah, exactly.
total distrust.
Yeah,
So how, I have a hard time, I'm sorry, you two are probably like, what have we gotten ourselves into?
You know,
I apologize, but
Well, I'd like
I'm
to
just
make a
being
statement
honest.
after Mr. Schwartz.
I don't really know how else to say it, but as of night one, that's where the distrust was formed, and then it hasn't been rectified. It hasn't been repaired.
I
and
made it
that's
my
where
business to talk to Danny before the first meeting. We shared with each other a little bit about each other. I met with you, we had coffee, and I have to say, when we had the first meeting, I made a suggestion that the board president should actually be someone who has experience on the board. And I was bulldozed out of that and bulldozed into 2 resolutions, none of which were discussed with anyone on the board who was on the board before you came and put them into practice. And you just went ahead and bulldozed them through. If you have a political agenda, that's not what I'm here for. I am not here for my constituents telling me what their politics are. That's irrelevant to education. Just like what you said about critical race theory. You know we don't teach critical race theory here. You know it's not part of the curriculum, yet for some reason you felt it was the first thing you had to do to pass a resolution against critical race theory. That engendered distrust among our students and our staff. We had students walking out of school because of it, and that's on you guys. I'm sorry, that's on you guys.
Thank you. It's getting a little heated, and I just want to go right back to what Michael and Sandy are trying to provide. They're going to bring in gears for us, and one of the gears that I see missing is the benefit of the doubt. Mrs. Barclay, you did not give us the benefit of the doubt. One thing that's going to help us in the governing handbook on February 21st is validating points that each board member makes. Both of you just invalidated the majority of the board's decision. That goes against the governing handbook. So when these gears get set in place, I would urge you, and I hope that you might respect the rules of the governing handbook so that even when you disagree, even then, we act as a unified voice.
If you don't
mean
mind,
like
Mr. Schwartz,
I'm sorry,
Mr. Schwartz,
Danny.
if you
Go
don't
ahead.
mind, please.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, because this did kind of take a little bit of a turn, and I think that maybe I can speak to the two of you a little bit different than that conversation, because I have gone to great lengths to establish a rapport, to build that trust with everybody on this board, everybody I believe in the cabinet, regardless of what we disagree on. And because of us getting pulled into these types of conversations where our voices get raised. Listen, I've been guilty of it too, right? Mr. Clown Factory, I don't have my t-shirt yet, but, right? And we've all been guilty of maybe speaking from the heart and letting our emotions get the best of us. But when we sit in a meeting and we've gone through, now the last 60 days or whatever it's been of trying to build that level of trust, which I think we have built a relationship that we can continue to build on. When I'm accused of a misdemeanor criminal offense in a board meeting without being given any of that kind of benefit of that relationship that we've built, that sets back any of this building that we've done all the way back, right? And what I want to see and what I want to see from all of us moving forward is as we make these gains and we build this rapport and we're able to have conversations with each other, that we don't just tear that down in a moment of passion or being upset about a particular issue. We try to remember that we're going to get through this issue. Tomorrow we still have to pick up and move the ball further down the field. So I just wanted to address that specifically because it was hurtful, I will say. It was hurtful just because I believe that we have established that relationship, and I felt like maybe I misread the situation. We didn't have that rapport, right? Similar to Mr. Schwartz, when you get animated and you raise your voice that way, it seems to only be in these meetings and behind the microphone. When we can talk about these things, we can have these conversations very civilly. We seem to have a normal discourse. So I want to see this board move forward and to get over some of this hurt and some of this distrust. So I don't want to see us regress in this setting. We're here to build on this relationship. So I'll just leave it there.
Well, I'm sorry, I do just have to, because I've been wondering if you would feel that way about that, because I didn't want you to. And what you're referring to, I did mull it over for quite a while when I realized what had happened. But that was my only recourse, was to bring it up prior to a vote so that it would not have been an issue. Because right then, if we had stopped, there would be no violation. It would be done. So that was my point, is I didn't put all of that together until the day of the board meeting and realized that this is what's happened and we definitely should not proceed because it is a violation. So it was definitely not, and I do apologize if you felt like I was, because I thought you might. Yeah. And I did feel bad about that, because I don't want you to feel like I did that in violation of any conversation that we had had or any trust that we had built. But as a board member, I did not feel like I could let that go once that came to my attention. Right. It's my duty to bring that forward.
And I don't want to discount any of your feelings about the specific issue, because I don't think tonight is to go into the specifics of those issues. We'll have that opportunity soon.
Yes.
I want you to understand where we're coming from as people first. Let's build that rapport, all of us together, and then let's talk about those issues. Coming from a place of understanding, you know, we're all good people, we're all honest people.
Agreed.
I feel that way about everybody sitting around this desk. I don't feel like anybody is out to get me in some way, and we need to all get to that place so that when we have these conversations, we're doing it in a constructive way. Right?
Yes,
So
and
that's
as a reminder, I did give you benefit of the doubt. I reached out to you and you before the first meeting multiple times to sit down and talk. Because, again, I believe everyone's coming from a good place until you prove me wrong. So I did reach out and try to do that before our first board meeting. And I hate to keep bringing that up, but, you know, when you're telling me that I didn't give you the benefit of the doubt, I did. I tried to talk to everyone, and I am trying to build that consensus. You know, as a leader in my everyday job, that's what I do all day long. You know, I have to do that with my staff. Everyone has such different opinions, and we all have to come together and get buy-in. And I feel like we can do that here, but it's not just words, it's our actions. So we need to work together, and please, let's have a boring board meeting where we can have more things where we agree on, and not try to, you know, we all hear from people what they want to have happen in the district, but we have to come together as a board and do what as a group we feel is best. And I'm sorry, I will never agree with the CRT resolution. And I know what it says in the board policy, but it's never gonna happen, so.
Yeah, so one of the things, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm still having a problem understanding. When I give somebody the benefit of the doubt, I might ask clarifying questions. Hey, did you mean this by that? Hey, did you mean, like, to get more information before I bring a judgment forward? You were in the accusatory in the last board meeting. You did not ask clarifying questions. You asked very simple ones. Did you know, Mrs. Wiersma talk to Mr. Renner? Did Danny? And then you said, oh, this looks like a brother. That was a very premature judgment you made in the accusatory, and I'm having a hard time understanding how you were giving us the benefit of the doubt when you didn't ask any clarifying questions. So yes, indeed, actions do matter.
Because
and I don't think we're going to
people talking to the same person is a.
No, because clearly, well, if this will come out, you actually are wrong when you accused us of the Brown Act, and it's going to cost legally, it's going to cost financially. That will come out. So what I'm trying to impart to you is when you say that you're giving us the benefit of the doubt, actions matter, your actions were not like that in the last meeting.
Well, I would disagree with that. I was bringing forward what I was doing as my duty as a board member when a perceived violation took place. I had no other recourse but to bring that to the public, which is where all conversations should have taken place.
You had another recourse, asking more clarifying questions before you accused us legally of a possible misdemeanor. I'm sorry. I'm trying to bring you reality here.
I feel like this looks like Brown Act violation, therefore, we should not vote on this. That was what I said.
So I'm going to bring us back, because I think, and you know, this is the reality. This is what governing in 2023 is like. There are a lot of strongly held beliefs, positions that are brought forward. It is challenging. It's always been challenging, let's be real. Being on an elected body, and especially at a school board where we're responsible for people's children, is always fraught with emotion and all kinds of issues. That being said, this is a sticky, thorny piece that you are all going to have to figure out how you go forward. And I'm going to bring us back to, because so much of what you're doing right now is part of this. And your challenge is you do your work in public. It is a challenge. The Brown Act requires it. It's the sunshine law, because what we do as elected officials needs to be given the light of day. And so that makes for stilted conversations. It makes it awkward to get the work done that you need. That's why these workshops are things that high-functioning boards do engage in periodically throughout a year, because stuff can bubble up that's not agendized in the same way. It's about your governance work, which is agendized, but it's not about a specific topic. You're going to have to be very, I'm just going to say it, very committed to both actions and words going forward. Words matter. Actions matter. The two together are extremely powerful. And so, you know, what you've brought to light today is, and I go back to why these trust pieces are so important. The more we know about people, the more willing we are to broach and ask that question. The more willing we are to understand how to approach a question, right? All those nuances are built on that interpersonal relational piece. And so when we don't have that, it's easy to assume all kinds of things about intent and motive. And so you're going to have, and I'm going to turn this, I think you want to finish with, we'll touch on the other piece, but we're getting close to, this takes about, take us to the end. Okay, we'll do a little quicker. But a commitment to this and doing what you're doing right now, which is saying, this is how I felt, this is what it was, I got to confront the brutal facts, I got to tell you the truth. All of those pieces are part of, I'll just hand it off to my colleague,
Absolutely,
building trust.
Cindy, and I just want to say one thing before we start this exercise, because it gives you an opportunity to go through an example and to make your trusting concept into action. Okay, that's what this exercise will do. But you know, I listened to the dialogue, and I'll tell you, I try to look for always the positive out of a situation that seemingly is not so positive. I can write down a list of things that I actually said that I found positive. Number one, you guys were open about what you felt, okay? Because one of the things we're going to talk about is talk straight. Again, I'm not getting into the exercise yet, but that's number one. Speak your mind. Otherwise, I don't know what you really mean. Say what you mean what you say. I saw that taking place, Andy.
Yep.
Number two, I saw moments of vulnerability. I saw Danny going in and talking about the conversation you have had is because I want to reach out to you. We could disagree and understand that the issue is disagreeable. I may never change my mind, but I still respect you. I want you to understand that I'm hard on the issue, but I'm not hard on you. There's going to be a lot of times that's going to happen, and it's okay. That's why it's a five-vote board situation, and sometimes the way it works in democracy is really messy. There's nothing wrong with 4-1, I'll say, at least in my humble opinion. There's nothing wrong with 3-2, because that's what the system's built to do, to solve a situation that could be very disagreeable, depending on your philosophy and things of that nature, and your constituency that you represent. That's what democracy is all about. But to go through what you guys went through in terms of an exchange in public, I found a lot of positive out of that. I actually think it's a very nice first step moving forward towards building trust. I just want to leave that there for you guys, and it's actually a compliment to you to be able to face that and be able to talk out your differences and appreciate the strength behind that and to see it for what it is, and we can get better at continue to build that trust. And with that said, if you will indulge me, I'm going to try to do a shorter version so we can conclude, Sandy, with your governance piece. And this is a copy handout that says Speed of Trust from Stephen Covey, 2006. Again, as I said, there's 13 components in the actionable items that we're looking at. And the exercise here is to rather just talk about trust, we're going to make it actionable, okay? And so what I like for you guys to do, and just in the interest of time, we're not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to give you maybe 5 minutes to kind of have you go over it yourself. And this is what I'm looking for before I give you my example, okay? So you're gonna take a look at these 13 actionable items that's on the sheet. And you're gonna pick maybe one or two that resonate the most with you, whatever that means to you, okay? And then you're gonna turn that particular actionable item into the I will statement, because this is about you. Trust begins with you. I'll give you an example, and then if we have time, we can share out. So I'll give you an example. One of my when I was going through this, and it just came to mind, I will probably pick number 4 for me personally, right or wrongs. I make mistakes, and I'll give you a specific example. In negotiation back in 2008, if my CBO is watching, she'll say, yep, I remember that clearly. We sat down, went through some numbers. It was myself, I was in charge of human resources, and our CBO were meeting with the teacher association. And then we went through the numbers, and this is not negotiating away from the table, this is sharing information, right? And when the conversation ended, feeling pretty good because I felt like, we were transparent about what we did, and they walked away, maybe, hopefully accepting the data we shared with them. So that's a good meeting, okay? 2 minutes later, after the meeting ended, the administrative director who actually ran these numbers came in and said, where's so-and-so? The meeting just ended. I gotta tell you, I miscalculated. That number should be this number. And guess what? It's in favor, if you will, of the district, meaning there's a surplus to what we were talking about, okay? So what do you think we did? Let it go? Because the meeting ended, okay, right? We call the union president immediately. We said, have you got off the parking lot yet? No, I just walked out, Michael. Come on back. This is something I need to share with you. We went to the office of the CBO. We sat down, and we flat out said, that number we gave you, it's not correct. We just got the information, and I need to give you that correct information. Whatever we do with that information, we'll move forward together, but I owe it to you to give you the right information without being asked. Without being asked. And I think if you think about Stephen Covey, the depositing people's emotional bank account concept most of you may have heard, I'd like to add one more piece to that as a building trust. When you deposit into people's emotional bank account, don't do it because you expect something in return. Do it because you don't expect anything in return. That kind of deposit into people's emotional bank account is a genuine deposit. People remember that. So when you run into conflict, that will come back to you twofold. Okay? So with that said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Some of you started reading and writing already. If you would indulge me, please. Scan through these 13, pick one that resonates the most with you, and turn that into an actionable statement for you. It should say something like, I will, ... And if we have time, maybe we can do a quick share out. As you're thinking about writing the I will statement, be as specific as you can, because it's something that if we were to go through this exercise and have a follow-up, we want to come back and say, you said you would do this to build trust. With whom did you do that? We want to make sure that that's actionable for you. What was that?
Is it really?
That'd be,
Oh my gosh.
that'd be great.
See there, it's Sharon right there. That's great.
I parked close. I had a feeling.
It's also windy too.
Nowhere near us, right?
Oh wow. Okay.
Goodness, that's something.
So
They're gonna,
so
they're
so
gonna
that
snow
so
us
that
in. You're not getting out of there.
yeah, exactly.
So you figure it out.
So I am looking at everyone pretty much stop writing. The rain has started and sets the mood, so to speak, you know, a little bit of vulnerability. But I would definitely, in this exercise, not put anybody on the spot. And I'm actually reserving my attention to the governing board, including the superintendent. Only if you wish to share one of your actionable items, I would really appreciate it. And then we'll move on to the conclusion that Sandy will walk us through.
Start?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was getting the look there. Okay. I chose number 11, listen first. And I think, especially when the pandemic hit, I mean, things just catapulted in speed. And we were dealing with 1,000 issues per minute, all brand new. And so I think I especially have to slow down, not be in such a hurry to resolve a problem and move on to the next one because we're dealing with them so quickly, but really take more time to listen and then through questions, help the speaker come up with resolutions themselves. I mean, that's what we do as educators and mentors. But again, I think we developed some bad habits when we were in such a hurry constantly. So for me, it's slow down, listen first, rather than jumping in.
Thank you, Jody.
I made a commitment when I was elected to do the best that I could for my schools and the children in them. And I believe I've kept those commitments based on the feedback I get from the parents and teachers and principals of the schools that I visit. And I feel very proud of that. I think that's really important. I'm going to right wrongs because sometimes when I am passionate about something, I get upset and I speak loudly, so I apologize for doing that because it's not done in anger, it's just a product of my passion, and I don't want people to take it personally. It's just the way I feel about things, and when I feel strongly about something, I get a little bit loud.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
I'll go. I picked create transparency. It's something that I've been vocal about for a while now. It's one of the reasons I ran for school board because I didn't understand all the intricacies and I wanted more transparency, so I had to run a campaign to figure it all out. But my statement was I will remain open to our community and demand transparency whenever possible. The interesting thing about transparency for me is that transparency is not just telling people what they want to hear. It's being honest about your position. It's telling people when you can't be transparent with them and helping them to understand the why behind that. And so I think it's important. I think it helps with communication and something that I want to stick by that commitment that I made. So thank you.
I'd like to say number 2 really hit me with demonstrating respect because I know that if we model that and if we can change some of the way that we're doing things with conversations and mediating and being more diplomatic, I'm hopeful that that will then have a ripple effect into the community. I want to demonstrate respect by genuinely letting people know that I value them as individuals, administrators, leaders, whether they're in the union, families in the district, the teachers. I think I will always be someone who tries to speak truth, so I'm not going to deviate from that and how I, as an individual, am working through things. However, my prayer is that there's always that respect and that people will walk away from me knowing that I'm different in that capacity, that I'm not going to cancel someone I may get an email or a conversation that is quite ugly, and I've gotten quite a few, and my goal is to try to take that higher road, not because I'm a better person, but because I want to learn more about my character and then exude something to people that will, where eventually they'll see I'm different. The little things matter. That's why I brought the little Valentine bags for each of you. I'm sorry I didn't have two for you, but you know, my husband asked me last night, like, what are you doing? You have so much to do. And I'm like, I'm creating a Valentine because I want people to know that I care. Even if we disagree, even if there's issues that week, even if something's heard in the rumorville, you know, that may or may not be true, at the end of the day, I want people to know that I do care about them and want to respect them.
Thank you.
In honor of my daughter, I'm going to go with number 7, get better. When she was on a cheer team, her coach would make them do things over and over and over again, and her chant was, let's get better. And they loved it so much they put it on their sweatshirt. And so I will try to always get better. I think I try to listen to feedback. I am my own worst critic. I go back and watch board meetings and say, why did I say that? Why did I do that? My tone did not reflect my feelings. I need to get better. But I do want to continuously learn and get better. I don't have all the answers. I don't think I'm always right. I definitely want to follow my daughter's lead and get better.
Thank you.
Thank you. I chose listen first, which was hard because I had to listen to everybody first. And this is the one that I've got to put in. No, that's the joke. So something that's just resonated with me in the last 2 years generally is and I teach logic and critical thinking. I'm pretty good at arguing, but that's the pitfall, is that I want to be right sometimes. And what I'd like to do is just get more clarity, because like the scissor example in the golf tournament picture, other than reminding me I needed a haircut, that was the very first thing I thought about. I thought, there's a bigger picture, and sometimes I'm certain about something, but that's a psychological predicate. It might not necessarily logically be true that I'm right about this, and then if I step back, I'm like, oh wow, there's another gear I didn't know about. So me being a new board member, and especially as president, I have to learn all these gears, so that I might, you know, not come to a judgment too quickly. And just a case in point, and one of the things I did listen to, and I took it to heart, was the first board meeting with Steve, and you know, you got a little heated, which I didn't, you know, at that time, whatever. You yelled at me and you said, "You're supposed to go last," and I was like, "Oh, he might be right." Like, so I listened and I thought, "Oh, okay, yeah, let me go last." And so I separated you got a little heated. I separated out of the way and I said, "That's all right. I'm still listening. I'm still learning." So touche to you for helping me along. The learning curve. There you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you for going through this exercise with us, and thank you for indulging me. And again, actionalize these steps. And if you do that on a daily basis, as a team, you will only get better. Okay, so thank you very much. Sandy?
I thank you. I mean, there's not one of us anywhere that can't do better, right, with those, in any setting. So appreciate your honesty and reflection there. I always like to throw in my Dewey quote that, you know, Dewey always says, we never learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on the experience. And so the more that we can do that, the better we are, the more I love that. What was it? Let's get better. Let's get better. All right. So we have a very quick piece to read. So you should have in your packet it's actually a blog called The 4 Traits of Governance Mindset, How School Boards and Superintendents Can Create Effective Governance Systems. And so this is simply a blog that Davis Campbell wrote that sort of covers the main pieces in the governance core. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. If you don't read the whole thing, that's fine. I think you will. But what I want you to do is, if you look on the next slide, as you read, in what ways does the text affirm your thinking? In what ways does it expand your thinking? And is there anything that it raises a question about as you go through the text? So those 3 things. It's pretty much a down and dirty, but I hope it will kind of bring together all of these pieces that we've been talking about as we wrap up this evening. All right, so you're just making notes, what affirmed your thinking, what expanded your thinking, if anything. What questions do you have?
One of the things that, are we asking?
No, we're ready.
Yeah, one of the things
I saw
that's,
people still underlining, so I didn't want to push. Thank you.
for me, this is the most favorite part of the whole night, even though it's going to require another half an hour to really think about this and process this. One of the things that stands out is our highest priorities for the students, but that also includes our public behavior to the students because we're role models. And when they look up to us, you know, quite frankly, in the last few weeks, they could see an activist, they could see a parent, they could see a teacher, they could see a caring administrator, they could see a whole bunch of different things, and it's the way we emulate ourselves to them, and I think it's just really important. Not saying I'm the best, I'm just saying that I'm very cognizant thinking about that. You know, the students, they look up to us, and if somebody gets out of line, they might think it's cool to get out of line. We don't want that. And all of a sudden, you got a disruption in the system, and then we're no longer a flourishing TVUSD if it just gets regular. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm just saying it cascades sometimes, hence the student walkouts. You know, maybe they had a reason for it, but even if they do, our behavior and the way we act in front of them should be higher to where we're above reproach. I mean, that's just what I took away from manage your public behavior or your public manner.
I'll follow that up because I actually underlined the same thing. And in managing your public manner, it was kind of the very same thing. And it may not be that you know, necessarily the students look up to us, but we do set an example up here. And I've thought about that many times over and over again. I've thought about how you know, sitting here listening to public comments and wanting to crawl underneath the desk at some of the comments and having an opinion about those public comments and how can we as a district or even as a board or individual board member ask somebody to use more respect or more care with their words when they address this board, knowing that we're volunteers essentially and here to do the best we can for our community when we're not exhibiting that behavior amongst ourselves. And so yeah, managing public manner I think was the one that stood out most to me.
The dominant characteristic of most dysfunctional boards is their inability to find common ground, and I think that's a great statement, and I think we'll have our differences, but I'm really excited about finding the common things that we share, and I think we saw some of that in the last meeting, and I think time will prove that, but I'm looking forward to those moments because wouldn't it be great, the 5-0, I mean, I just think there's so many things that we each see as something we might be able to contribute, and I love looking forward to that. So I know that's something I'm gonna mull over and think about, and I hope we all do as a board.
A lot of things really resonated with me in this one. I do love that it talks about that it defines governance, is setting the direction and the ongoing oversight of the district between elections. So, it feels like what happened during the election should be left at the door. Because I always used to joke, like, everybody running for president of the United States has so many great plans. And as soon as they get in the office and get to open the secret file, all of a sudden, sometimes they are talking about some of those plans. And it feels like that's a little bit how it was even here. Like, once you get in and you start learning about what's behind things that are happening, sometimes what we said during the election or what we've said to certain constituents may have to go out the window based on our new learning. And I think that's what's really important is that, in this section where it talks about we can't make quality decisions around something we don't understand. So, it's back to Stephen Covey, who I think is fantastic on so many levels, where he talks about, listen first and learning. And I think really that is our role as board members, as we don't come in here as experts. I mean, I have extensive experience with school boards and school districts, and I am far from an expert. So I really appreciated those definitions of governance and what our true role is on a board, because I don't even know that I was really clear with that when I came on the board, even with my experience with boards and school boards. So I appreciated those clarifying definitions in there.
I guess I was fortunate. I was the only one not running for election in 22. So I kept having people on my block saying, hey, where are your signs? How come I don't see your signs up? Or how come you're not around knocking on doors? We didn't get any literature from you this time around. So in that sense, I was just an observer of what was going on. But as an observer, I continue to do my work on the board. And for me, number two, having a strategic focus, again, I keep going back to the same thing. For me, the focus is the children, the students, the teachers, the classified staff, doing the best we can for them whenever we can, and that's what I'm here for.
All right, I am ever mindful of time, and it's Valentine's Day at almost 7 o'clock. So we wanted to end at 7. I'm a longtime teacher, so I love a good closure exit ticket, but I'm gonna just ask you to look on page, on your last slide. We're gonna skip the little video. It's, you can Google it if you want, but it's a wonderful little video. But I do want you, I gave you my favorite Dewey quote earlier, that reflection is really how we learn. And so we would have had you share out if we had more time, but I do think it's important. You are a learning board. You want to be a learning board. You want to get better. And it's work. Any team that wants to get better works at it. It doesn't just happen by default. It isn't always easy. You'll have hard, courageous conversations. You'll still have your point of view and your perspective. But hopefully, as you go through this initial phase of storming, we've had some of that, and now we get into some norms, and you're going to work on that with your governance handbook, and then to form into a team. It does not mean you will have unanimity, and that's okay. You are here, you were elected for a variety of reasons, but I love too the phrase you brought up, that the governance is your work now. And so how do you elevate to that as a board with your amazing cabinet for your amazing school system to keep that direction setting happening and moving that ship, as you mentioned earlier. So just think on your drive home tonight, what's a takeaway from today? Something you maybe are glad we talked about, and then something that you still have some questions about. And I just say it again, it's like anything, if we don't practice it and we don't work at it, if we don't set goals. Goal setting is one of the most underused tools that we have for both. I've argued this as a teacher, for kids, for adults, because when we set goals and we monitor those goals, we have a chance of achieving them. I'm really a big fan of The Atomic Habits, if you haven't read it yet. It's a great book, but it really reminds us that we need to incrementally improve. That's what you're after. You're after slow, incremental improvements to get to where you want to be as a governing team. And with everybody rowing a little bit more in unison, you can get there. So thank you very much for giving us time with you today, and all of you for making the time for it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My favorite.
Board comments.
So I brought something just in honor of Valentine's Day. I love this. I thought I might share it. It's one of my favorite. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. Love does not boast. It's not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil. It rejoices with truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And that's from 1 Corinthians. And I'm hopeful that we can, on this day and moving forward, have more of that injected into all that we do.
Very sweet.
I was very excited that the meeting got real. It was just a matter of time. It was happy-go-lucky for about an hour, and then it got real. And I don't think we can improve as a governing board until it gets real and it's on the table. And just like Mike said, there was a lot of positives in that because we all got vulnerable and we laid out what we believe is the truth, and it'll get hashed out even more when we go to the governance handbook, I believe. But just hopeful that we can work together. Happy Valentine's Day, Steve, Allison, Danny, Stacy. Thank you. Yeah. The announcement of the next meeting, the next regular open session business meeting of the Governing Board of Education is scheduled for February 21st, 2023. Adjournment, the meeting adjourned Tuesday, February 14th, 2023 at 6:58. Meeting adjourned.